A complete lore of the Powerpuff Girls, 1998 to 2005. We know you have been secretly waiting for this. And here we are with a recap of one of the most iconic 90s children's cartoons. Powerpuff Girls is a series so goated that its merchandise is still very much in demand, and a live action was almost there. The series is created by Craig McCracken, and in case you need a little flashback, Blossom, Bubbles and Buttercup are color-coded sisters, accidentally created by scientist/dad Professor Utonium when he spilled Chemical X into his concoction of sugar, spice and everything nice. The girls are kindergartners with superpowers living in the fictional city of Townsville, saving it from villains and monsters. The series had a long run for 6 seasons with 78 episodes, and we are going to cover the complete lore of the series with the best stories that impressed the young minds. If you appreciate our efforts in bringing you this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more.
Hey, stop that!
Season 1, Monkey See, Doggy Do / Mommy Fearest. It's nighttime in Townsville and everyone is falling asleep. But someone is stealing an Anubis bust from a museum, and along with it, a pair of Anubian rubies. The great robber turns out to be the monkey man Mojo Jojo, an evil genius with a sinister plan. He fits the rubies in the eyes of Anubis, and his mass destruction weapon is ready. The next day, the Powerpuff Girls investigate the crime scene, and while flying away, they notice a dog trapped in a car. As they free the dog, it starts to speak in a human voice, before switching to barking. Soon, they discover every human in Townsville is turned into a dog. The girls notice a Powerpuff signal and rush to the mayor's office. However, he and his secretary, Miss Bellum, are also turning into dogs. The girls decide to head home and get help from Professor Utonium, but Bubbles is busy playing with the mayor-turned-puppy. Meanwhile, Mojo Jojo is having a blast turning everyone in the street into dogs. The series is narrated by Tom Kenny, and when the narrator complains to Mojo Jojo, the maniacal chimpanzee attacks him. As the narration suddenly changes to barking, we switch back to the Powerpuff Girls' abode. Unfortunately, the professor has also turned into a pipe-smoking dog, and the girls still try to communicate with him. They understand his language and fetch him water, and play fetch with the pipe. Professor Doggo takes a jolly good time before revealing Mojo Jojo as the culprit behind it. In the meantime, Mojo Jojo has installed the Anubis head on a machine that enables him to turn every individual on Earth into a dog. As the Powerpuff Girls break into Mojo's lair, they are also turned into Power Pups. However, the girls do not lose hope and realize that the Anubis bust holds the power. They try to break it, but Mojo Jojo saves the bust, yet Buttercup jumps on him from the back. As the Anubis bust falls and breaks, everyone else is returned to their human form. But Mojo Jojo turns into a dog. The girls bring him back to their house to keep as a pet, but the professor warns against keeping such a dangerous one. Although this is the first episode to air on Cartoon Network, the next episode was supposed to be the second one. Now, for the second segment, it's again bedtime for the Powerpuff Girls, and the professor puts them to sleep after taking care of their mischievous demands. However, he is drained out and feels lonely sleeping alone. But not for long, as the next day, while shopping, he encounters a beautiful woman called I'm a Good Lady, who gets his speech stuck. Not to worry, the girls arrange a date for him with Good Lady and even dress him up for the occasion. The professor leaves the mayor to babysit, and he does a swell job by sleeping through most of it. Things go a little fast as the professor returns with Good Lady and informs the girls that she is moving in. Ema insists the girls need a little feminine care, but as soon as the professor is out of earshot, she reveals her true bossy nature. The episode was once banned for depicting child abuse, and Chris Savino wrote it to address toxic femininity. FYI, Savino is also the showrunner and producer from 2003 to 2005. Ima stops the girls from going on patrols and makes them do housework. When they finish it in a swift manner, she breaks stuff and forces the girls to work without using their superpowers. At night, she stops the professor from enjoying TV time with the girls and sends them to sleep. However, as the hotline rings, the girls leave to stop crime. Good Lady catches the girls when they sneak back in and grounds them. As the professor appears, she pretends to be a doting mother and blames the girls for being disrespectful. But later, that night, Ema sneaks out of the house, and soon the mayor calls the girls about Seducer robbing his jewels. Too much of a coincidence? Well, Blossom doesn't think so, and she rallies the girls to catch Seducer in the act. As Ema sneaks back home, the girls confront her and take off her wig. The Powerpuff Girls beat Seducer, but when the professor arrives, she again tries to frame the girls. This time, the professor believes the girls and hands over Seducer to the police. The next morning, another sweet lady appears outside to congratulate them with a pie, but the girls approach her as the scene cuts off. Insect Inside / Powerpuff Bluff. This was supposed to be the official first episode by production order, but was broadcast later by the channel. It starts with Bubbles running away from a cockroach as Buttercup tries to kill it and destroys the house in the process. Blossom tries to stop them, but she too is icked out by it. The professor teaches the girls never to crush any insect or judge them by their outside. He releases the roach out in the road, but the roach turns out to be a pet called Skippy to an unkempt man called Roach Coach. Roach Coach hates humans and shouts at them, but Skippy's intel makes him rejoice. He calls on all his cockroach friends and rallies them to attack the city. As Townsville gets overrun by cockroaches, Assistant Sarah Bellum implores the mayor to call the Powerpuff hotline, and the girls reluctantly agree to come over. This is the first time the girls are shown in school. The name of Sarah Bellum is again based on the word cerebellum, because she is the brains that help the mayor run the city. As the girls arrive in the city, they are super grossed out, but Buttercups gives Blossom an idea. She brings a gigantic jar to fill it with the cockroaches and save the city. However, Roach Coach wouldn't have it. He uses his whistle once again, directing the cockroaches to break through the glass jar. As the cockroaches cover the Roach Coach, he turns into a giant roach monster. As the Powerpuff Girls get inside the roach monster, they notice it's gross, both inside and out. The girls take down the monster by beating down the cockroaches, but Roach Coach falls directly on the street. However, he does not die, as the body turns out to be mechanical, with a single cockroach operating it from inside. The king cockroach is locked in a jar and jailed for good, while the episode ends with Professor quashing a spider. In the second part, 3 criminals start robbing the Townsville bank, jewelry store, and even the mayor's mansion. The guys call beautiful women Sweet Cheek, and each time they are nabbed by the Powerpuff Girls. At the mayor's house, the crooks try to rob a precious porcelain poodle, but the mayor is ready to give up everything, including his wife twice, in exchange for it. Thankfully, the girls arrive and save the mayor as well as the poodle. The mayor gifts Blossom with the poodle, but she accidentally breaks it. While watching the news on TV, the crooks get an idea to dress up as the girls and commit a crime in disguise. For some reason, there are Powerpuff Girls masks and clothes hung in their cell for the crooks to take up the disguise. They easily fool the guard and the employees at banks and the jewelry store as they give up everything to the imposters. When the mayor invites the fake, outlandish Powerpuff Girls to his mansion, they trash up the place, flirt with Bellum, and beat up the mayor. Ms. Bellum feels something is not right and asks the mayor to take action, but he calls on the police to arrest the girls. Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory is one of the classmates in this episode. He makes a few other cameos in the series. The real Powerpuff Girls get arrested from Pokey Oaks School and put in jail, much to their horror. Ms. Bellum comes to visit them and claims to believe their version. As the crooks recall what they called her, the Powerpuff Girls realize who is behind the antics. Despite all of Blossom's protests, the girls break out and confront the imposters. At first, they accidentally beat up each other, but Blossom suggests fighting only their counterparts. Eventually, their disguise is removed and they are handed over to the police. The mayor claims to recognize the fakes, but sends the girls back to jail for breaking out of it. Octi Evil / Geschund Fight. Townsville is attacked by a 3-headed giant snake, but the Powerpuff Girls are here to save the day. They play with the snake, and when Buttercup throws it a bit too hard, Blossom gets mad. The two sisters argue, making Bubbles tear up. The entire thing is watched by a sinister person who can only be referred to as him. Apparently, him is so evil that taking his name would make anyone explode. Him gets disappointed when his snake beast fails, but Bubbles' reaction gives him an idea to create a rift among the girls. The demon is called him, as producers of the show thought calling him Satan or Devil would be a controversial gig in a children's show. Him possesses Bubbles' octopus toy and starts manipulating her. He convinces Bubbles to ask Buttercup to take over leadership from Blossom. The next day, when a monstrous turtle attacks Townsville, Blossom's strategy doesn't seem to land well. Bubbles takes Octi to the fight, but Blossom orders her to keep it away. Octi again manipulates Bubbles, and she instigates Buttercup to rebel against Blossom. As Buttercup again tactlessly uses brute force, the monster turtle almost crashes into an old granny crossing the street with an aide. Blossom becomes furious, and the girls take the issue to the professor at home. As the professor separates them, him reveals himself as Octi turns into a giant. Octi blames Bubbles for creating the rift and leaves to take over the planet. Bubbles follows him angrily and gets captured, but her cry for help alerts her sisters. Blossom and Buttercup rush to save their sister and even reconcile, which makes the giant octopus and him burn and disappear. In the second part, we are introduced to the Amoeba Boys. They are the lousiest criminals in the history of crime. They even fail to steal an orange and want the Powerpuff Girls to lock them up for littering. When the girls just ignore them and leave for not committing a crime serious enough, they stand by the Keep Off the Grass sign day and night amidst thunder, rain and sunshine. Soon, they get sick and start spreading it around the city. Ms. Bellum and the mayor also get the flu and call the Powerpuff Girls on their hotline. Blossom refuses to believe it's a serious situation and asks the mayor to call when it's absolutely necessary. However, soon, an ice cream truck with a sick driver breaks down in front of the school and throws up all the phlegm on our girls. Ms. Keene is, however, free of the virus. She is named after Margaret Keene, the American artist, whose paintings were an inspiration for the Powerpuff Girls' large eyes. The Powerpuff Girls fly away to investigate the matter and find all the townspeople falling unconscious because of the flu. As the girls start rounding up the sick people, the Amoeba Boys constantly approach the girls to fight them. The Powerpuff Girls barely have any time for them, and when Buttercup gets super upset, she rudely asks them to leave. The girls also fall sick and visit the professor, who shows them the virus. The girls find out the virus resembles the Amoeba Boys, and Professor Utonium asks them to bring back the boys. The Powerpuff Girls find the Amoeba Boys leaving and ask them to come back, but they have a condition, which is to fight the girls. The Powerpuff Girls barely manage to knock them out, and later, Professor Utonium creates antibodies from the Amoeba Boys that help the city recover. Buttercrush/Fuzzy Logic. The episode begins with the introduction of the Gangrene Gang. When they bully a bunch of kids in the park, the Powerpuff Girls appear. The gang leader Ace pretends to beat up team member Snake for pulling the underwear of a kid, and somehow the gesture makes Buttercup laugh. As Ace pretends to apologize on behalf of his friend, Buttercup starts developing a crush. Well, who can blame her for being doe-eyed for a bad boy? They have a second encounter at the museum, where the Gangrene Gang breaks valuable museum artifacts against the soda machine. Blossoms and Bubbles beat the Gangrene Gang, but Buttercup nods a hi to Ace, who insists they were only trying to get soda. Buttercup covers her sisters and the gang members with a rug, allowing the gang members to escape. She also hands Ace a soda, and he asks her to hang around with them. That night, Buttercup sneaks out of the house when everybody is asleep and arrives at the dumpster hangout of the Gangrene Gang. At first, the gang members have trouble accepting her, but soon they start enjoying themselves together. When Buttercup leaves the next morning, Ace reveals to his happy friends that he is going to use Buttercup to rule over Townsville, but before that, he must take care of Buttercup's sisters. Buttercup doesn't have any lines in this segment, except an apology at the end. The next night, Gangrene member Grubber pretends to be Buttercup and calls Blossom and Bubbles to save her as she is stuck on a conveyor belt. However, when Blossom and Bubbles arrive, they are stuck in a trap and are about to be dropped into boiling liquid. Meanwhile, Buttercup and Ace dance to loud music, but when she accidentally breaks the wall of the shack, Buttercup notices her sisters. Buttercup not only single-handedly saves Blossom and Bubbles, but also takes down the Gangrene gang. The second segment is about a creature called Fuzzy Lumpkin, who stays in a cabin in the woods near Townsville. Fuzzy doesn't like anyone on his property or touching any of his things. He is short-tempered and possessive. When a squirrel drops onto his porch, Fuzzy gets mad and tries to shoot it with his gun. The squirrel keeps getting away, and a mad Fuzzy chases it across the woods and into the streets of Townsville. However, a bus knocks into him, and as his stuff falls around, the citizens pick it up and try to return it to him. This drives Fuzzy crazier as he starts punching, kicking, and beating people. He doesn't even spare an old lady or the police. Fuzzy Lumpkins was created as a combination of Lurky from Rainbow Bright and Precious from Muppets. Meanwhile, at kindergarten, Blossom mediates a similar fight between Bubbles and Buttercup as they tug at Octi. When Bubbles is forced to share it, Buttercup hits her sister with the doll. They get a call from the city, and as they visit downtown, they notice all the injured people. None of the victims is able to properly describe what happened, but Bubbles' special ability to communicate with the squirrel helps the girls learn about Fuzzy Lumpkins. The squirrel takes the girls to Fuzzy's cabin, and they interrupt his banjo session. Fuzzy tries to beat the girls for breaking in, but the tables turn soon when the girls toy around with his banjo and Buttercup beats Fuzzy's head with the banjo. Later, in prison, an inmate takes away Fuzzy's already broken banjo, serving him a lesson. Boogie Frights / Abracadabra. Buttercup teases Bubbles as she is afraid of the dark and the boogeyman, but rightly so. When Buttercup frightens Bubbles and Blossom, they shriek in terror, and the professor rushes in. He explains it's okay to be afraid, but people must be brave to face. He keeps the door ajar so that the hallway light creeps in. However, Boogeyman has some other plans as he gathers all the monsters in his nightclub and leads them to a new midnight. But let's first give it up for Boogeyman for his fashion and rockstar charm. For the first course of his action, Boogeyman calls Scissors to cut off the city's power line. As the city submerges in darkness, all the monsters come out from under the bed, inside the refrigerator, and dark corners to party all night. Boogeyman arrives fashionably late, and it's almost dawn. However, nothing to fear when Boogeyman is here, as he shoots the large disco ball he was working on to eclipse the sun. Drowned in perpetual darkness, the monsters start rampaging and scaring people, especially children. The ruckus wakes up our dear Powerpuff Girls, and they leave to investigate. Bubbles and Buttercup actually enjoy the party, and dance a little before they get down to business. I mean, fighting the monsters. However, it's too many of them, and the girls decide to break the disco ball blocking the sun. This is a reference to the Death Star attack in Star Wars: A New Hope. Boogeyman chases them, and Bubbles gets scared, but the professor's words echo in her ears. The girls destroy the ball and send Boogeyman flying into space. As the sun comes out again, it forces the rest of the monsters to retreat or disintegrate in light. The theme of horror continues, as during the demolition of an old magic theatre, the mayor recalls the death of his favourite magician, Al-Lusion. In a flashback, Al-Lusion is showing magic tricks when he calls a volunteer from the audience who looks like the Powerpuff Girls. When Al-Lusion vanishes Anne's teddy bear, she demands it back and pulls Al's pants down, bringing him shame and revealing all his tricks. People laugh at Al while he accidentally stumbles into a spiked Iron Maiden and dies. Back in the present, the demolition of the building wakes up Al-Lusion as he turns up as a zombie. He has now become a demented real sorcerer called Abracadabra and wreaks havoc in the city, putting people's lives at stake. As Abracadabra conjures saws cutting into buildings, one of them even slices up the mayor's hat. At Sarah Bellum's insistence, he calls the Powerpuff Girls for rescue. Did you know Pamela Anderson was once considered to voice Ms. Bellum, but Jennifer Martin did a fine job? On the other hand, the girls have been enjoying movie night, watching a zombie movie, and freak out when they learn they have to encounter a real one. When Blossom faces Abracadabra, he mistakes her for Anne and blames her for what happened to him. He hypnotizes her. And although Buttercup slices him up into different parts, they rejoin. Abracadabra also traps Buttercup in a hacksaw box and stashes Bubbles in a bag before dropping it in a fish tank. He kills Blossom by throwing her into the spiked Iron Maiden. But hope is not lost, and it's a children's cartoon after all. Blossom reveals herself to be under Abracadabra's costume. Buttercup and Bubbles also emerge from the hacksaw box unscratched. It's revealed at last that the real Abracadabra dies once again in the same trap. Telephonies/tough love. The episode starts off with the Gangrene Gang making crank calls, with the narrator being their first victim. Lil Arturo tricks Professor Utonium into holding the telephone line indefinitely by making him think he won the $10 million. However, Ace is not satisfied and decides to do something bigger. He makes Grubber impersonate Ms. Bellum and asks the mayor to meet her outside. This gives them the opportunity to get their hands on the Powerpuff Girls hotline. They impersonate the mayor and send the girl after Mojo Jojo, who was enjoying a siesta. The girls break into his observatory and beat Mojo Jojo, but later feel embarrassed when they find out he was not doing anything evil. The same thing repeats with Fuzzy Lumpkin, as they make Fuzzy irrationally mad by beating him when he was just enjoying an outdoor bath. In the meantime, the girls are surprised to find the professor glued to the phone and standing like a statue. The false encounters start making the girls doubtful, and when the mayor calls about him, the girls tread cautiously. They find him exercising and ask if he is up to something. It's amazing that him is one of the earliest queer characters, and quite the favourite one, of creator McCracken. Anyway, the Powerpuff Girls' sudden, uncalled-for attacks start to bug out the villains, and the trio get into a call. As citizens, they decide to complain. But when Him calls the City Hall, Billy answers it and reveals everything about making crank calls. In a twist of events, Mojo Jojo, Fuzzy, and Him take down the Gangrene Gang. As they fight, the mayor calls the girls to stop the fight, but they are too tired and ignore the call. Buttercup even burns the telephone with her laser eyes. Before we proceed, let me share a short highlight of what awaits you. First, there will be some competition from boys who have powers like theirs. The girls will also have to fight alien vegetables, imaginary foes, and their own sister. A lot of this will involve Mojo Jojo, who doesn't seem to learn from his mistakes. In the second act, the Powerpuff Girls unintentionally make him jealous when he notices that they are well loved by all. Him contemplates a lot and finally devises a plan for the people to hate the Powerpuff Girls. Deep in the night, he spreads hatred in the hearts of Townsville's people for the Powerpuff Girls. So right from the morning, the cat they had rescued earlier scratches Bubbles, and an old woman chastises them for helping her. The girls receive similar beratement and abuse from Ms. Keene, who instigates other children to throw apples at the Powerpuff Girls. The mayor and Sarah Bellum are no good either, as they call upon the SWAT team to capture the girls, and they escape in the nick of time. Professor Utonium also appears equally dangerous with red glowing eyes. The girls try to run away from the professor, but find the door blocked by the rest of the citizens and close ones, who hate them. Him doesn't shy away from revealing he is the mastermind. Him is in fact inspired from the Blue Meanie from Yellow Submarine. Tom Kane, not to be confused with Tom Kenny, voiced him and the professor. Him makes the townspeople beat the Powerpuff Girls to dust, and the girls are shocked. However, they quickly recover and realize they must consider the people as mere puppets. The girls thrash the townspeople into unconsciousness, forcing him to retreat for now. However, he promises to come back stronger. The girls also visit the people they thrashed in the hospital later and apologize, but they are forgiven anyway. Major competition / Mr. Mojo's Rising. A Townsville building is on fire, but before the Powerpuff Girls can put it out, somebody blows a cold wind and puts it out. The mysterious hero turns out to be a very muscular and manly superhero, calling himself Major Man. The people of Townsville fawn over Major Man, and when a crook threatens an old lady for almost nothing, Major Man flies out of Earth and then pounds on him. The people of Townsville ignore the Powerpuff Girls, and the dejected girls move back home. Soon, Major Man is almost everywhere, stopping crimes, saving people, and beating villains. There is also a Major Man theme song. On that note, the Powerpuff Girls were popular enough to have kids' meal toys sold by different fast food chains. Subway and Burger King sold toys of the girls and Mojo Jojo in 2000 and 2002 respectively, whereas Dairy Queen sold 6 different toys in 2001. Meanwhile, the girls are bored and are upset that Hotline never rings. It finally rings, but only for the mayor to tell them that they grew apart and that he has found someone else to save the city. While the girls get devastated, the mayor shoves off Powerpuff Hotline and sets up the Major Man Hotline. Suddenly, Professor Utonium calls them, but it's only to watch Major Man on TV. During his speech, Major Man accidentally lets out that he knew about the mishaps before they even happened. This makes the Powerpuff Girls suspicious, and they spy on Major Man. They find him purposely kicking a puppy into the middle of the road and then stopping traffic to save the little guy. The Powerpuff Girls come up with a plan, and soon a monster attacks the city. The people of Townsville remain calm, assuming Major Man will save them, but the monster tries to eat Major Man and he asks for help. The Powerpuff Girls appear to save the day, but the people take their time remembering the girls. The Powerpuff Girls make Major Man confess that he had set up all the crimes himself with the help of his family. As citizens learn the truth, Powerpuff Girls saves Major Man and asks him to leave the heroics to real heroes. The citizens apologize to the girls and ask them to be their superheroes again. The Powerpuff Girls agree as the citizens and the mayor leave to set up the hotline. However, the monster was actually the Powerpuff Girls' monster friend, Fred, and the girls apologize to him for being too rough. The second part is about the Powerpuff Girls' archenemy, Mojo Jojo. He kidnaps Professor Utonium and leaves a note for the girls. The note's crude handwriting is actually of Craig McCracken. When the Powerpuff Girls arrive at Mojo Jojo's observatory cum lair, Mojo Jojo tells them that Professor Utonium is also his father. He proceeds to tell the sob story about how he was just a smart lab monkey called Jojo who helped the professor and was loved by him until the day the Powerpuff Girls were born. The explosion also had an effect on him, engorging his brain, making him a genius. However, all of that went unnoticed as they were overshadowed by the girly charms of the Powerpuff Girls, and so Mojo Jojo went on his way and became vengeful. The professor doesn't remember all of it, but remembers having a lab monkey called Jojo. He feels guilty and assumes that all of Mojo Jojo's weapons are a silent call for help. As Mojo Jojo lets him go, the professor asks what he can do to correct his mistakes, and Mojo Jojo seeks the girl's powers. Professor Utonium agrees and toils with Mojo to create a copying machine. It copies the Powerpuff Girls' powers and gives them to Mojo Jojo, only for him to reveal his true intentions. The name of the episode is a reference to the song Ella Woman, which repeats the title. It's also an anagram of Jim Morrison. As the Powerpuff Girls fight Mojo Jojo, it becomes difficult for them to defeat the super-powered chimp. Meanwhile, Mojo's rampage reminds Professor that Jojo was actually a bad monkey destroying the lab. He even remembers how it was Jojo who pushed Professor Utonium, resulting in him knocking into the Chemical X container. And so it was Mojo Jojo who was responsible for the birth of the Powerpuff Girls. The news of him creating his own enemies shocks Mojo Jojo to the core, and the girls strap up the stunned Mojo Jojo to remove his powers. As the Powerpuff Girls leave with the professor, Mojo Jojo still can't believe what he did. Bubble Vicious / The Bare Facts. The episode kicks off with Buttercup fighting a giant slug monster. However, it's just a simulation used by Professor Utonium to train the girls. Buttercup goes hardcore and defeats the monster at difficulty level 9. However, when it's cute little Bubbles' time, the professor switches it down to 2. Bubbles gets upset and complains as she gets fried by a stupid little robot. At night, Blossom asks the professor to keep the door slightly open so that the room is not completely dark for Bubbles. All the comments about Bubbles being cute and soft make Bubbles extremely angry and creep into the simulation room, secretly, turning it to level 11, maximum danger. Bubbles defeats several monsters at one go as she huffs and puffs, but now she is angrier than ever. Tara Strong's voice as Bubbles remains truly iconic for scientific research. Especially so, since she also voiced Harley Quinn and Barbara Gordon in different productions. Bubbles shows her mean side the next day during a game of Duck Duck Goose as she chases and slams Blossom to the ground. When the hotline rings, Bubbles speaks rudely with the mayor and breaks the phone, slamming it down. To rescue the mayor from a traffic jam, Bubbles beats down a talking dog that can't drive, but was blocking the road anyway. But that's not all. Bubbles goes her separate way from her sisters and beats up anyone who is even remotely close to breaking a law. As Bubbles goes on an angry rant, Mojo Jojo ambushed her from behind and kidnapped her. He has made the most dangerously stupid plan to lure in the other two Powerpuff Girls. Mojo Jojo has got Bubbles strapped to a machine and fires a laser at her. As she refuses to cry, he increases the pain level to 11, making Bubbles cry out in pain. Blossom and Buttercup hear her voice and break into Mojo's lair. But by this time, Bubbles has got free of her restraints and beaten the brains out of the mad chimpanzee. As the girls reconcile and reunite, Mojo Jojo again tries to attack them with lasers, but gets a second round of bubble-vicious beating instead. The second segment is about different points of view. It begins with the POV of the mayor, as he talks about the things he loves, including his mayorship, when Ms. Sarah Bellum calls him to ask him to sign important papers. However, the mayor is interrupted when Mojo Jojo breaks in and kidnaps him. For the next bit, we are in the dark. I mean, Mr. Mayor was blindfolded after all, as Mojo Jojo declares. He hears the Powerpuff Girls break in and go boom, pow on Mojo Jojo, defeating him in a clean sweep. As the girls approach the mayor, they break into laughter and take him back to his office. When the girls take off the mayor's blindfold, they are still giggling, and the mayor asks what it is. Thus commences a long tale about how Bubbles was drawing daisies of different colours when they got a call from Ms. Bellum on the hotline. The creators have gone super hardcore in this one, as Bubbles' version is shown as a crude drawing on paper. She also squabbles like a real kindergartner. Blossom's version is a more clarified pink version, where she goes a bit narcissistic, while Buttercup's version is a cutthroat, no-nonsense thriller. They continue how Ms. Bellum found a note from the mayor saying he is going home to write his speech, but that's impossible, as Ms. Bellum is always the one who writes it, clearly. Townsville has a dumb mayor, which is close to their dumb major villain, Mojo Jojo. Meanwhile, the mayor gets restless to hear why the girls were laughing, and the girl finishes up the story by telling him how they thrashed Mojo Jojo and later rescued him. The girls finally make an excuse and leave hurriedly. We finally see why they were laughing, as Mojo Jojo seemed to have stripped the mayor naked.
My machine, my aquarium, my laboratory!
Just another manic mojo / mime for a change. The story begins at Mojo Jojo's volcanic tower, as he wakes up, freshens up, and gets dressed. As he goes to make breakfast, he finds he has no eggs. A grumpy Mojo Jojo curses everyone as he gets late. He also has to withstand people making annoying sounds as he waits to cross the road and over-explains to the staff at the supermarket when looking for the eggs for breakfast, after several curses and moments later. Mind you, he doesn't actually say the curses aloud, but just repeats the word. Ultimately, he sits down to have breakfast and reads the newspaper, which reports on the Powerpuff Girls' triumph. Adding fuel to the fire, a baseball breaks the glass and enters his lair, as Mojo Jojo notices the Powerpuff Girls are approaching to take it back. Mojo Jojo indulges his genius brain in some quick thinking on how to trap the girls and destroy them forever. The episode is a pun on the Bangles song, Just Another Manic Monday, which is just about like every other weekday except Friday. Mojo hides the ball and invites the girls in. Mojo also asks the girls to sit on the sofa and not touch anything, as he enters his inventory to find the best weapon to destroy the girls. Mojo Jojo locks in on a gigantic laser ray, but he is quickly distracted when he finds that Bubbles is trying to touch his precious Ming Dynasty vase. Soon, Jojo, is reluctantly drawn into a hide-and-seek match with the girls as they keep disappearing. Jojo is finally able to bring them back to the sofa and retreats into his secret lair. But this time, the girls come up and destroy the lab while looking for the ball. Mojo swallows his anger as he sends the girls back to their seats. He sits down to target the laser at the Powerpuff Girls, but once again, Bubbles tries to touch the vase. As it is about to fall, Jojo catches it and berates the girls, but he falls in line with the laser and gets fried up. An exasperated Mojo returns the baseball to the girls and sends them away. But to his horror, the next day, the newspaper headline says he saved the day by returning the ball to the girls. The second story begins with the Rainbow Clown dancing and entertaining a bunch of kids at Jim's birthday party. However, he almost gets crushed by a bleach truck, and the bleach falls all over him, turning Rainbow the Clown into a black and white mean Mr. Mime. No, not the Pokemon. The evil Mr. Mime turns everything he touches black and white, as well as drains their voices. Soon, Mr. Mime starts changing the town into his monochromatic self. The Powerpuff Girls school bus hits the black and white part of town when it almost crashes into a granny's car. The key word is almost, as the Powerpuff Girls save the bus and the car. However, Bubbles is in for a rude shock when she notices the surroundings. She goes on a manic spree, colouring the town with her crayons, while the other two girls leave to investigate the source of the calm. George Jetson from The Jetsons, 1962, makes a cameo in this story, like he does in a few other segments. Blossom and Buttercup come across the soundless welling babies, hip-hop boys, and even the police, until they eventually come across Mr. Mime, turning chirping birds, soundless and colourless. The girls chase after Mr. Mime, but lose him in an alley. Mr. Mime attacks them from the back and turns them colourless and comatose. Meanwhile, Bubbles finishes colouring and notices her sisters are missing. She goes looking for them and finds their motionless bodies. When her crayons fail to bring them back, Bubbles breaks down, but suddenly an idea strikes. She starts an impromptu concert in the middle of the park, which starts spreading colour and brings everyone back to normal. Mr. Mime notices and approaches them from the crowd, but the song "Love Makes the World Go Round" turns him back into Rainbow the Clown. However, the girls throw him in jail for his crimes as Mr. Mime. The Rowdy Rough Boys. In this iconic episode, we see Mojo Jojo applying different strategies, using mass destruction weapons to destroy and attack Townsville. But every time he gets nabbed by the Powerpuff Girls and thrown into jail. At one point, he just loses his cool and turns into a manic monkey, and sinister than him. In the darkness of the cell, he brews a plan to take down the Powerpuff Girls for good. He calls Professor Utonium a stranger, and on the pretext of research, he learns how he created the girls. However, Mojo Jojo wants to create someone opposite the girls, and someone not sugar, spice, everything nice. So he gathers up the armpit hair of the inmates, escargot, and tail of the talking dog. For Chemical X, he uses the dirty water from the cell's toilet. Thus, the Rowdy Rough Boys were created. Mojo, Jojo's evil sons, Brick, Boomer, and Butch, first attack him, but dear old dad teaches them that it's the Powerpuff Girls who are the enemy. The Rowdy Rough Boys bust out Mojo Jojo from the prison. Interestingly, the cartoon was also originally called Whoop-Ass Stew, which was the original ingredient in place of Chemical X. The Powerpuff Girls were also called Whoop-Ass Girls, and the name change only occurred due to the chances of it being misread and misconstrued. The next day, the Powerpuff Girls defeat a giant octopus, which falls on Bubbles, but she makes it out of its eyes, covered with slime. Suddenly the boys appear and thrash the girls, but they retaliate. The Rowdy Rough Boys are at first taken aback that the girls are not crying and challenge them. The boys and girls get into a head-on attack, which leads to much destruction as the girls start to lose. The boys also hurl a bus, an aeroplane, and a large ship towards the girls. The Powerpuff Girls save the people in the vehicles and decide to take the fight away from Townsville. As the battle commences, the afterburners weaken the girls and boys, sending them several feet below the ground in a fatal blow. Mojo Jojo rejoices, while the townspeople break down at the girls' apparent death. However, the tears trickle down and revive the girls, but they are still heartbroken and bid goodbye to the town when Sarabellum stops them. She guides the girls into acting nicely to defeat the boys. The plan works as the Powerpuff Girls bat their eyelids and kiss the rowdy rough boys, which makes them poof, and Mojo Jojo is sent to prison once again. But hey, the girls really enjoyed the kisses, well, except for Buttercup. Oh, Dynamo. While spending a family time at Little Tokyo's bonsai garden, the Powerpuff Girls come across a fish balloon monster that can blow itself to a larger size. The girls defeat the monster, but possessive dad, Professor Utonium, gets stressed out. He works all night to create a gigantic robotic Powerpuff Girl called Dynamo. He asks the girls to use Dynamo to fight the monster, but the girls keep on avoiding it, so much so that it gathers dust. However, all that is going to change. Again, the Powerpuff Girls visit the bonsai garden with Professor Utonium when the fish balloon returns, but this time he has got a companion, a giant fish balloon. The monster's skin seems impenetrable, and the girls are quite defeated when the professor begs them to use Dynamo. The girls are still keen on fighting each other, but are desperate. The professor threatens to ground them, and they have to reluctantly agree. This is the only episode in the season that was both produced and released in 1999. As the fish balloon monster rampages through Little Tokyo, the girls arrive at the Dynamo. Its protective safety shield activates, and the battle robot unexpectedly goes into a defensive curl, allowing the fish balloon to send it smashing across buildings. Blossom notices that the professor had switched on the safety system and stabilizes it. As the Dynamo finally engages the monster, it sends spikes, destroying more buildings in Townsville. At last, the Dynamo grabs the sign of a bowling rink and uses it as a shuriken to deflate the monster, which flies away and falls over Mount Rushmore. The arrangement of the bowling balls and pins atop the bowling rink is a reference to gutter balls, which was also referenced in other episodes. As the day is saved, the Dynamo does a victory dance, but the city is burning, and the mayor chastises the girls for it, prohibiting them from using the battle bot again. The girls and everyone blame the professor as he makes his exit in a helicopter. Season 2, Beat Your Greens / Down and Dirty. A curious-looking spaceship appears behind the moon and sends a sporpedo on Earth as it lands in the farms of Farmville. The harvest from Farmsville goes to the market as fresh produce and then into the Townsville home. But children in every household, including that of Professor Utonium, refuse to eat the greens. For once, the kids are right, as the Broccoloid King of the Broccoloids has sent the broccoli to infect the minds of the Earthlings, so that he can turn them into a vegetative state, with their eyes glowing green. As each adult's fall victim, the children gather up and the Powerpuff leaves to investigate the farm. Bubbles finds the sporpedo, and Blossom uses her microscopic vision to notice tiny, mind-controlling spores that enable hypnotransmythesis. The Broccoloids arrive on the planet just then and attack the girls. Blossom remembers the professor telling them about getting rid of broccoli by eating it. She calls her sisters and dives into devouring the broccoli. But as more UFOs land, the girls have to retreat to build an army. They convince every other child to eat the broccoli, and the kids arm up with spices and condiments. Jimmy the Jock protests, but Buttercup bullies him into submission. As the Broccoloid army storms into Townsville, the kids start eating them up, dousing them in cheese and pepper. More help comes from Farmville kids riding their cattle, forcing the Broccoloids to retreat. However, the Powerpuff Girls finish off the Broccoloid King and destroy the hypnotransmythesis for good. The parents reunite with the kids, but the next day they find the children still chomping on raw vegetables as they fight imaginary monsters in the market's produce aisle. In the second segment, a tank of oil falls on Buttercup while fighting a monster. As she creates a tornado and sucks up the monster to spew it outside of Earth, the city and her sister get all dirty and grimy. Blossom and Bubbles enjoy the bath, but Buttercup refuses as she thinks it's for sissies. The next day, Buttercup single-handedly defeats a mammoth-like creature, which gets her covered in slime. But again, Buttercup refuses to take a bath. When the stink reaches the professor, he asks her to bathe, but Buttercup refuses, so the professor has to kick her out. The next day, Blossom and Bubbles wonder about Buttercup when she fights a cyclops and gets doused in the dirt of a septic tank. When she finally reaches the kindergarten, the students and Ms. Keene can't bear the smell. Ms. Keene sounds the fire alarm for a fake drill and exits with the students. Soon, Buttercup is spreading her stench all across the town, making life difficult for the citizens. Buttercup notices everyone hiding away, and then, after handling several complaint calls, the mayor decides to take action. He asks Buttercup to take a bath, but the angry mob chases her with torches, which, as it goes without saying, is far too aggressive for a children's cartoon. Buttercup escapes and sits by the ocean, still stuck on her decision, when a sea monster attacks. Buttercup gets inside its nose while fighting, but the stench frightens the monster. It goes away after complaining of the stink, forcing Buttercup to give up. The episode ends with Blossom and Bubbles scrubbing and cleaning up begrudged Buttercup. Slave the Day / Los Dos Mojos. The first story is about Big Billy of the Gangrene Gang. The gang is up to its shenanigans, writing insulting graffiti all over Townsville, and now they are in the subway. As a train approaches, all of them get off the track, except for big, dumb, unaware Big Billy. However, the Powerpuff Girls are on the rescue and save Big Billy while his friends think he has been run over. Big Billy appears in the girls' room to thank them and quite literally becomes their slave, although Blossom is not too excited about it. Big Billy informs that he has left the Gangrene Gang and starts taking care of the girl. He even threatens the professor when he forces Buttercup to eat broccoli. At night, Big Billy reads fairy tales to the girl. But the real crisis strikes when he picks up the hotline and takes a lot of time telling the girls what it's about. Big Billy causes more damage than good as he goes out of his way to help the girls, finally infuriating Blossom, who sort of asks Big Billy to get lost. A heartbroken Big Billy returns to the Gangrene Gang and complains about the mean Powerpuff Girls. Ace and Grubber make a plan to get the girls and set a trap for them in the subway by using Big Billy as bait. They take the girls by surprise and tie them up in steel bars to be crushed by the choo-choo. However, the word reminds Big Billy of how the girls saved his life, and he stops the train to rescue the girl. But crime doesn't pay, so the girls beat Big Billy and the Gangrene Gang for trying to kill them in the first place. In the second part, the Powerpuff Girls are chasing Mojo Jojo through a construction area as the notorious chimp flies in his domed one-man ship. The girls' laser attack doesn't affect it, but Mojo's laser cuts through a rope and a beam hits Bubbles on the head. Before fainting, Bubbles sees and hears Mojo Jojo going on with his repetitive rant. When Bubbles wakes up at home, her head is all bandaged up, and she leaves hurriedly. Meanwhile, Mojo Jojo enjoys a good shower, but when he reaches for his clothes, he finds they are gone. Someone sinister has stolen his clothes and gear as they kick Mojo Jojo out of his tower. On the other hand, Blossom and Buttercup look for Bubbles when they get a call about Mojo Jojo attacking the city. They notice Mojo's ship driving a Robo Jojo that's destroying the city, but as they are about to fight off the Robo Jojo, the real towel-clad Mojo appears behind them. Buttercup beats up Mojo Jojo without checking, but she is in surprise, as well as others, when they find Bubbles has taken over the ship and is driving the Robo Jojo. Despite her cute and adorable voice, Bubbles identifies herself as Mojo Jojo. She dresses up like him and talks like him. Buttercup beats Mojo again, assuming he did something to Bubbles. Well, he is not completely innocent, as Blossom realizes it's because she got hit in the head. However, Mojo Bubbles is vicious than ever as she sends her sisters plummeting to the ground. Mojo Jojo rejoices and offers to partner up with Bubbles, but she refuses. As she goes on a rant like Mojo, the real Mojo Jojo again hits Bubbles' head with another construction bar. Bubbles finally comes to herself and notices her sister. She beats up Mojo Jojo as Blossom and Buttercup are relieved, and Bubbles is back.
Thanks to the Powerpuff Girls.
Imaginary fiend / coup de grace. A new shy boy called Mike Believe joins Pokey Oaks kindergarten. He doesn't speak to anybody or play with anyone else. However, he suddenly starts laughing and talking on his own. When Miss Keene asks about it, Mike claims that it's his friend Patch. The other kids laugh at Mike for having an imaginary friend called Patch. Soon, Patch becomes a nuisance in class, or rather a devil, as he starts hitting girls or dipping their braids in paint. When the kids complain to Ms. Keene, she berates Mike, but he blames it on Patch. When Ms. Keen asks Blossom and Mike to spell cookie, Patch teases Blossom by turning the C into a D. An angry Ms. Keen puts Mike in the corner on a timeout, but Patch remains unbothered. Moving on, Patches moves Ms. Keen's chair. Bubbles notices and realizes that Mike was telling the truth. Soon enough, the entire class witnesses chairs and stuff floating in the air. They wonder if it's a ghost. But when Patch writes on the board to tease the girls, they get angry. The Powerpuff Girls decide to use their own imaginary friend to fight Patch. So working together, the girls come up with a female bunny who is a scientist, wears a nice dress, and is strong like the girls. The imaginary hero bids goodbye after taking down Patches in almost the Looney Tunes way. As imaginary bunny is about to leave, Bubbles suggests that she can be friends with Koos from Dexter's laboratory, but Bunny refuses. In the end, the girls reconcile with Mike and offer to be his friend. The next part also begins at Pokey Oaks Kindergarten, as children run amok when a kid called Harry Pitt starts chasing everyone, trying to kiss them. Someone spreads the rumor that Harry has got cooties. FYI, cooties is a fictitious disease. When the Powerpuff Girls get a warning, Bubbles is the first to panic, but then the other girls also run away in terror. Mojo Jojo, the stalker, finds out what happened and finds Harry sulking. Meanwhile, the Powerpuff Girls have a nightmare of contracting Harry's cooties. When they are called to stop a bank robbery, they are in for a shock, as Mojo Jojo has brought Harry to scare away the girl. As the Powerpuff Girls stay away from Mojo in fear of contracting cooties, the evil chimp goes on a crime spree. He even helps other crooks and partners up with. Ultimately, Mojo Jojo takes the mayor hostage and lures in the Powerpuff Girl. He traps them, along with Harry, in a pit. The girls run away in fear, without anywhere to go, and finally, Harry lays a kiss on Blossom. This works well, as Blossom realizes it is a hoax. The girls kisses Harry, putting him in a trance. The Powerpuff Girls then rush out, and Mojo Jojo goes to jail with a creepy inmate smiling at him.
Really?
The Powerpuff Girls' best rainy day adventure ever. It's a rainy day in Townsville, and there is no crime. The Powerpuff Girls are bored, and Bubbles comes up with the brilliant idea to pretend play inside their house. The game starts off well, with Blossom introducing the people of Townsville, and suddenly, Buttercup, the alligator monster, attacks. Blossom and Buttercup start arguing about timing, when Bubbles pretends to be the mayor. Must say Bubbles, or rather Tara Strong, does a fine job imitating other characters. Blossom again pretends to be Ms. Bellum, and stuffs her dress with toys to mimic Ms. Bellum's chest, which is one of the rare instances the cartoon sneaks in some adult humour. Bubbles also calls the hotline, and the mayor picks up. Being as dumb as he is, the mayor jumps out of the window as a Powerpuff, only to fall into the mud. As the pretend play continues, Buttercup pretends to be Blossom, but Blossom doesn't like it, while none of them wants to be Bubbles, which makes Bubbles tear up. As the professor enters the room to find out what happened, the girls force him to be Bubbles. After the monster is defeated, the girls get into a discussion to find out the mastermind behind the ploy. Bubbles suggests it's Fuzzy Lumpkin, while Buttercup does a fair job imitating him. However, Blossom insists it's Mojo Jojo, although her impression of the character is not as good as Bubbles. Speaking of Bubbles, she gets too excited and hits Blossom. As Blossom decides to hide and apply her most diabolical plan as Mojo Jojo, Bubbles and Buttercup chase her. However, with Blossom hiding in the bathroom cabinet, they fail to find her and give up the search. Blossom later finds them playing video game and stops the game midway. As Bubbles and Buttercup chase after Blossom, they finally catch her. The girls finish the game and the day with a lot of laughter. The next day, a similar but real disaster strikes and forces the tired girls to jump into action. The next story is a sequel to the segment Supper Villain, as the narrator introduces the very average family of the Smiths. So Harold Smith wanted to be a villain and attacked the girls during dinner, leading to a food fight. Harold was imprisoned, and Mrs. Marianne Smith promised revenge for ruining her dinner. So after spending several monotonous days working at the jail, Harold is free and returns home. He profusely apologizes to his wife, but to his surprise, she now hates the Powerpuff Girls and is ready to take them down. Their children, Julie and Bud, also join in. The family suits up in their villainous costume, but Harold still has his same old stupid one. Marianne again cheers him up by showing him the diabolical new supervillain car, the the Smiths minivan. When Professor Utonium and the girls go grocery shopping, the family enters the Powerpuff home and trashes it. They celebrate, thinking that the girls will be all sad. But when Marianne enters their house with cookies, she finds the girls still positive, as they are not harmed. Marianne immediately leaves and gathers up her family in the minivan. The supervillain family chases the professor and the girls throughout the Powerpuff home until the girls have had enough. They destroy the van with a single blow and ask what all this is about. Marianne goes on a rant, blaming the girls for putting her husband in jail and ruining dinner, even after she invited them and tried to be a good neighbor. This obviously doesn't make sense to the girls, and after beating down the family for good, they send all of them to jail. Twisted Sister / cover-up. While people in Townsville are happy and going on with their lives, the Powerpuff Girls are busy fighting monsters and crime. So much so, they are soon pretty burned out. And surprisingly, even the professor remains blissfully unaware as he reminds the girls of the tasks they need to perform before saving the day. The girls come up with an idea to create another Powerpuff Girl, but instead of sugar, they get an artificial sweetener, and instead of spice, twigs and branches. For everything nice, the girls put in anything they feel is nice, even lizards and boxing gloves, according to Buttercup. Finally, for accidentally spilling Chemical X, Blossom pretends to drop Chemical X in the concoction. However, the result might not be what you expected, as what emerges is a crude, big Powerpuff Girl with developmental issues. The girl names her Bunny and sends her off to fight crime. Bunny misconstrues the police with guns as the bad guy, as she thrashes them and puts them in jail. Later, the Powerpuff Girls come across a TV news report of the renegade Bunny disrupting life at Townsville. This episode won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Individual in Animation in the Art Director category, and it was truly deserving for the beautiful representation of the character. The Powerpuff Girls confront Bunny and call her bad, which makes Bunny tear up. She leaves and starts crying on top of a cliff, while the Powerpuff Girls get attacked by a mob of all the criminals let out by Bunny. As the girls call for help, Bunny hears them and flies back. She takes out the villains and emerges victorious, but she explodes as she realizes she is good. This is one of the rarest times in the cartoon where a character died. The Powerpuff Girls realize Bunny was unstable and feel sad after she is gone. In Cover-Up, the girls are at it again, fighting crime. But it's mostly Buttercup, who just loves kicking ass while the other two relax. However, the next day, when the girls get a call on the hotline, Buttercup is late and hides something. This doesn't deter her from fighting like a badass once again and saving her sisters in a critical situation. The next day, when the mayor calls, Buttercup is again late and Blossom gets angry. As she and Bubbles go looking for Buttercup, they find her cuddling with a green comfort blanket, repeating that she is a good fighter. Buttercup makes several excuses for her behavior and leaves to combat the villain, denying the fact that she is superstitious. However, when she loses the blanket the next day, it's mayhem in the Powerpuff house. Buttercup looks for the blanket everywhere and refuses to go crime fighting without it, so the other two leave anyway before it's too late. When Buttercup finally turns up, they find the monster is a really small one, but Buttercup still doesn't have the confidence to beat it. The monster's powerful belching is enough to destroy Townsville and attack the girls. As Buttercup fails to attack it and gets defeated, Blossom gets the blanket for Buttercup. As Buttercup regains her confidence, she swiftly defeats the monster and cuddles with her blankie. However, Blossom reveals it's not the real one and proves that Buttercup is a good fighter without the security blanket. When they return home, Buttercup again looks for the real blanket, and the professor returns it, along with other fresh laundry. Buttercup hugs the blanket. But when Blossom and Bubbles get angry, she lets the professor have it, and turns out it has the same effect on him as he rubs it, and repeats that he is a good scientist. Speed Demon / Mojo Jonesy. For a change, the story begins at Pokey Oaks Kindergarten, as Buttercup eagerly waits for school to be over. Ms. Keene brings her to pay attention, but moves directly from elementary to complicated math, explaining time travel. The kids are saved by the bell, and it turns out the girls can't wait to get out of Townsville, its good-for-nothing mayor, and visit the Bahamas with Professor Utoni. As Ms. Keene waves them goodbye, Buttercup challenges her sister in a race, and suddenly they are going beyond the speed of light. As the girls go into flash mode, they travel into the future, but are unable to realize that. They look for the professor and find him old and haggard in the lab, trying to create the Powerpuff Girls once again. However, He has forgotten the recipe and gets scared of the girls, as he assumes them to be hallucinations. The girls rush out of their house and find the city in ruins. When the girls get to the town hall, they find the mayor is dead, and an old Ms. Bellum is driven mad by sorrow as she laments about the girls not responding to the hotline when she called. The girls eventually arrive at the school, but find an old Ms. Keene in a similar demented state, as she reveals the girls were missing for 50 years. Soon a strange, familiar voice appears, telling them about the time travel. It's none other than him, and the girls beat him, but it seems to have no effect on. As him mocks the girls, he transforms into a formidable demon-like form. He calls on the girls' classmates, who walk like zombies, and blames the girl for abandoning. The entire city starts blaming the girls and drives them crazy. The girls rush up to space to get away, and as they run back to Earth, they travel through time again, arriving at the present. But this time, they refuse to go to the Bahamas and decide to stay back to protect the city. The second segment begins with the Powerpuff Girls entertaining their classmates by showing off their powers. On the way back home, 4 of their classmates start discussing the cool superpowers they would like to have. Mojo Jojo lurks in a dark alley and beckons to them. As Mojo Jojo wears a trench coat and a hat, he introduces himself as Mojo Overcoat. He offers to give superpowers to the kids and exposes them to Chemical X. Before the kids leave, Mojo Jojo asks them to have fun. Moving on, the kids use their powers to play around, but soon find their powers depleting, and they return to find Mojo Jojo. However, this time Mojo Jojo asks the kids to destroy the Powerpuff Girls in exchange for Chemical X. The desperate, multi-ethnic, and truly diverse kids agree and return to attack the Powerpuff Girl. After the Powerpuffs are vanquished, Mojo Jojo reveals himself to the kids and flies away in his jetpacks. The guilt-ridden kids try to chase Mojo Jojo again, but find their powers dwindling. They rush back to the girls and use their powers to revive the Powerpuffs. The girls find Mojo Jojo at the mayor's office as the mayor was offering up Townsville to him. They beat down Mojo Jojo and send him to jail. Later at school, they teach the class about not accepting gifts from strangers, and the kids apologize to them. Something's amiss / slumbering with the enemy. It's no secret Ms. Bellum and the mayor have a little something for each other, but this time, Sarah Bellum goes out of her way, seducing and kissing the mayor to take the rest of the afternoon off. However, she comes running back in the evening and hurriedly calls the Powerpuff Girls to report a crime. The girls and Ms. Bellum visit the bank, which was robbed, but there is no clue. Ms. Bellum breaks down as she couldn't stop the robbery, and the girls ask her to return home. Again, the next day, Ms. Bellum seduces the mayor to take the rest of the afternoon off, and then reports a crime in the evening. The same pattern follows until one day, Ms. Bellum doesn't arrive at the office, and the mayor receives a fax in the evening. He calls the girls and laments as he shows the fax to them. It's a letter from Seducer informing that she has kidnapped Ms. Bellum and wants a ransom of $100 million. The girls promise to bring back the secretary and scan the town when they notice Ms. Bellum and Seducer at Ms. Bellum's home. The girls crash into the room with a bag full of money and confront the women. Surprisingly, Ms. Bellum has tied up Seducer, but the girls suspect foul play. Blossom throws Ms. Bellum across the room and pulls off her wig, revealing she is Seducer. However, Seducer stops the girls by sticking them to a window with her sticky tentacle hair. Thankfully, the girls have managed to loosen Ms. Bellum's bond, and she gets free. She pulls off her Seducer mask and fights Seducer, which takes them to the swimming pool. Ms. Bellum knocks out Seducer in an underwater fight, but she recovers and comes up to the water. However, the water has washed away the gel, and Seducer can't fight with her wet hair. Ultimately, Ms. Bellum cuts off Seducer's hair. Later, the mayor rejoiced at having Miss Bellum back. The girls reveal that the bag they took for ransom was filled with the mayor's dirty laundry. However, when the mayor starts to reveal their relationship, Ms. Bellum stops him, as she was not the one seducing. This makes the mayor leave to meet Seducer in the prison. In the second part, the Powerpuff Girls prepare invitations for their slumber party and hand-deliver them to all their girlfriends. Mojo Jojo gets his hand on one of the invites and arrives at the slumber party as Moajisha. However, he is not fooling the girls, as they immediately realize it's Mojo Jojo. But not to scare away their friend, the girls keep quiet. As Moajisha shares her grandma's tea with the girl, they become suspicious, but it turns out to be rather harmless. During hide and seek, The girls trash Professor Utonium's lab while looking for Mojo Jojo, while Mojo, or rather Moajisha, hides behind a plant. The girls pretty soon become convinced that Mojo Jojo doesn't mean any harm and just wants to party. The girls give up and join the fun party activity. One of the party activities included the girls looking through a teen magazine, and a picture of a man wearing a black eBay shirt is of Craig McCracken. After partying all night, the girls fall asleep, and Mojo takes his chances. He creeps out of the room and steals Antidote X. As he finally reveals himself to the Powerpuff Girl, they rush to attack, but Mojo throws the Antidote X on them and the girls faint. Mojo Jojo removes his disguise in front of the normal girls and celebrates turning the Powerpuff Girls into normal. As his rant becomes more insulting, the volley of girls attack Mojo Jojo, while the Powerpuff Girls wake up and enjoy the view. Season 3, Criss Cross Crisis. This is a legendary episode and a whole 22-minute segment. It begins with Professor Utonium conducting an experiment which sends a strange wave across Townsville and its surrounding areas. However, it has switched the bodies of people, so Professor is Buttercup and vice versa, while the same goes for Blossom and Ms. Bellum, as well as Bubbles and the Mayor. The Professor tries to explain how the accident happened when he tried to switch apples and oranges. The girls ask Professor to correct the experiment to switch back, while they suddenly get a call from the hotline. Mayor Bubbles and Ms. Bellum Blossom call to inform that there has been a robbery, and the girls suit up. Bubbles refuses to go out as she has the mayor's body, which means she is bald, but Blossom calms her down and convinces her to leave. People and animals have also switched in the bank, as no one is able to tell them anything. However, an old woman with a Mojo-like attire points them towards Fuzzy Lumpkin. A Totoro from Ghibli makes a cameo in the scene, but it's not the only cameo in the episode. It's pretty clear that the old lady is the culprit, Mojo Jojo, as she is the only one acting like herself. The girl disrupts Fuzzy's tea and finds out it's actually an innocent British gentleman inside of him. When a jewellery store is robbed, the old lady is again there, and this time she directs the Powerpuff Gang to the Gangrene Gang. However, Gangrene Gang now hosts a set of rich teenage girls. They inadvertently direct the Powerpuffs towards Mojo Jojo. As the Powerpuffs arrive in Mojo's lair and beat him up, they learn it's the actual old lady. The Powerpuffs now confront the old lady, forcing her to reveal herself as Mojo Jojo. As a battle ensues, Mojo Jojo ties up the trio with cable. Right at the moment, Professor Utonium perfects the experiment and again changes everyone. However, he doesn't reach the right combination, and Mojo Jojo gets changed into sumo fighters, while the Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup transform into a Wiener dog, a caterpillar, and a snake, respectively. This helps Mojo to get the upper hand, but when the Professor again pulls the lever, Mojo Jojo is turned into a fish, while the girls are turned into an Eskimo, a chef, and a fisherman. The transformations continue as the Professor tries out different combinations. McCracken, Paul Rudish, and Don Shank, the storyboard artist, make a cameo in the lab as Professor Ms. Bellum and the Mayor. At last, he achieves the right combination, and the girls take down Mojo Jojo for good. The episode, however, ends with Bubbles speaking in the narrator's voice, while the narrator becomes Bubbles.
Whatever, and save the day. And these glasses are there to help.
Bubblevision / Bort and Scold. When a giant ant attacks Townsville, the Powerpuff Girls fly to the city to save it. However, Bubbles suddenly starts having vision problems. None of her punches lands right, nor do her laser beams. When Blossom and Buttercup notice Bubbles talking in the wrong direction, they rush her back to the Professor. The Professor runs a series of eye tests for little Bubbles and gives her glasses, but it makes her eyes pop out even larger, making her sisters break into laughter. Blossom and Buttercup call Bubbles a dork and a nerd, which makes Bubbles sad, and she refuses to wear the glasses. But the Professor manages the situation and asks her not to listen to anything her sisters say. Looks like the Professor knows his daughters all too well. As soon as they are out of the house, Blossom and Buttercup again make fun of the googly-eyed Bubbles, which makes her angry. She takes off the glasses and runs into several trees while making her way into the city. The segment pays homage to Warner Brothers, Them, 1954, while it also shows what vision and hearing impairment feel like. Back in the city, Blossom and Buttercup struggle to keep up with the giant ant, while Bubbles has lost her way. When Blossom and Buttercup finally appear and ask her to wear the glasses, Bubbles refuses, as they would laugh at her. The girls promise not to laugh, but immediately break down into giggles as soon as Bubbles wears it. Meanwhile, the ant creeps up on them and catches Blossom and Buttercup. As Bubbles also gets stuck by the ant, she finally dons the glasses and uses the laser beam rays. It gets magnified by the glass and destroys the ant, but also chars Blossom and Buttercup. Later at the lab, Buttercup explains to the professor what happened, and accidentally a laser beam hits the mirror and hits Bubbles in the eye. It works as a laser surgery to cure her eyesight, but now Bubbles can't hear properly. For the next segment, the narrator starts off with a roundup of all the villains living in Townsville that are always defeated by the Powerpuff Girls. However, when the Gangrene Gang breaks into Ms. Keene's class and bullies the children, they show a new decree to the Powerpuff Girls, which stops them from stopping the crime. The decree makes crime legal and is signed by the mayor. However, to their shock, the girls learn that Princess Morbucks is the new mayor, as the old ones sold the city in exchange for a room full of Turkish delight. With crime being legal all over Townsville, constant theft and robbery have become common. As the girls dejectedly come home, they find people taking away all their furniture and stuff. The professor asks the girls what happened, but they don't answer. While sleeping on the floor at night, the girls tear up about the situation, but in the end of it, Blossom makes a plan to get back at Princess Morbuck. So when the princess sleeps and then wakes up to get water, she suddenly notices that all her things and all the valuable stuff are gone. Princess Morbuck hurriedly calls the Powerpuff Girls for help, but when the girls arrive, they argue that with crime being legal, they can't do anything. Scared of what her father should do or say, Princess Morbuck writes a new law making crime legal again, which helps the Powerpuff Girls stop the crimes and send several prisoners back to jail. However, they return empty-handed to the princess, and Morbuck realizes the girl has done it intentionally. But with her father waking up, Morbuck becomes desperate and returns the key to the city and the mayor's hat. Unfortunately, the girls return the items to the road, which earns Morbuck a scolding. 3 Girls and a Monster / Monkey See Doggy 2. The episode begins with news about Townsville being awarded for showing the best teamwork. A visual representation of teamwork among the folks is shown, which is interrupted when a big, giant, enormous, terrifying orange monster emerges from the ocean and proceeds towards Townsville. The mayor has been practicing musical glasses when the stampede rocks his glasses. However, teamwork is absolutely lacking among the Powerpuff Girls right now, as Blossom and Buttercup argue about strategic planning versus brute strength. As they argue about it without picking up the phone, Bubbles answers the call and rushes out to save the city. At first, the girls follow Blossom's strategic maneuver, but fail miserably when they are smashed by the monster. Buttercup comes around and unleashes the full strength of her muscles, and even that doesn't work. As Buttercup and Blossom go into an argument again, Bubbles follows each of her sisters' plans, but nothing seems to work on the monster. As Bubbles gets exasperated with the constant arguing and repeated thrashing, she sweetly approaches the monster and asks it to leave. The monster is a good one and returns to the ocean, whereas Bubbles gives an earful to her sisters. But as they return, Buttercup and Blossom continue to bicker. This episode was made as parents complained that the show made children think that violence is the only answer. But our take on this: sometimes we don't need to complicate stuff. Speaking of complications, the next segment is about our twisted evil, Mojo Jojo. This time, he tries to rectify his past mistake. The episode starts off the same as Season 1 episode Monkey See, Doggy Do. Mojo Jojo steals the Anubis bust from the museum along with the Anubian jewels. The Anubis head is now glued together after the Powerpuff Girls broke it. As the girls investigate the crime again, they find that all the humans are again turned into dogs. The girls can't believe Mojo Jojo would be stupid enough to repeat the same mistake. However, when they visit Mojo Jojo, he shows them a video feature of what happened previously. He shows how he has installed cameras all over Earth, like Paris and Eskimo Land, to observe humans turned into dogs. After the brilliant first segment, this may seem like a filler, but don't worry, it sure is funny. As the girls get bored, just like us, Mojo Jojo comes around to reveal how he has not turned the Powerpuff Girls into puppies, which means Buttercup can no longer bite his butt. Mojo Jojo has also shielded his butt with steel traps so that the bite doesn't hurt him. However, this time, the girls simply kick his butt as once again Mojo drops the bust and everyone returns to normal except for Mojo Jojo, who is turned into one and gets sent to the pound.
Stuff, and then bam! The Sultan fell down, and the little guy.
The Headsuckers Moxie/equal fights. One night in Townsville, a bank manager is closing up the bank when a short man stands before him. The manager informs the bank that it is closed for now and leaves, but something or someone follows him and attacks him. The next day, the bank is covered by bewildered police as the safe is completely cleared. The Powerpuff Girls speak to the ill bank manager, but he is clearly traumatized and cannot remember anything. As his head hurts, Blossom tries to look and finds a circular bite mark on his head. The event repeats itself, now with a security guard in a museum. He also gets attacked, and the next day, the police find all the artwork gone. Again, the security guard can't remember anything, but has a bite mark. That's not all. The girls hear a shriek and find out that a pirate has lost his booty after the robbing leech bit him. The girls return home and contemplate how to catch the guy. They realize the Sapphire Sultan might be the next victim, but arrive a bit too late. The short man is robbing Leech, and he sucks out the brain of the Sultan, making him faint. The name of the villain is a reference to Robin Leach, a former TV show host of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. The robbing leech takes the sapphire stone from the catatonic Sultan's belly button. As the Powerpuff Girls arrive, the mayor explains everything to them, but he assumes he will be the next target. Although this is most unlikely to happen since his brain lacks any substantial information, this gives Blossom an idea. She ropes in her sister on the plan and loudly speaks about the mayor withholding information. As the Powerpuff Girls expected, the robbing leech overhears and later at night attacks the mayor in his home. The girls catch robbing Leech red-handed, but he gives them quite a good fight, until the girls use the mayor's empty head like a fish bait. A dried-out robbing lech is then taken away by the police. The second segment is about equality and fairness. Townsville was won, well, until the newest villain, Femme Fatale, strikes. She robs a bank, but only wants the Susan B. Anthony coins because she is all for feminism and equal rights for women. When the Powerpuff Girls arrive to catch her, Femme Fatale sort of brainwashes them into thinking that the city belittles them. She asks the girls about female superheroes who are not shadows of male versions, and Blossom comes up with only one Wonder Woman. This might not be entirely true, as there is also the Scarlet Witch, Black Widow, Zatanna, Starfire, and more. Anyway, the speech is enough for the girls to think otherwise, and they let Femme Fatale go free, as she is the only female villain left with Morbuck and Seducer in jail. The girls return to school but start viewing boys in a different light. They start bullying the boys, and Miss Keene observes the change. The girls also get angry at the professor when he asks them to clean their room, and also shout at the mayor for always calling them for help. Meanwhile, Femme Fatale goes on a robbing spree, and Ms. Bellum decides it's time to take action. She asks the Powerpuff Girls to meet, and then, together with Ms. Keene, Ms. Bellum tries to drill some sense into the girls. They make the Powerpuff Girls realize that the men are not at fault. As more women appear, telling the girls how Femme Fatale has harmed them, the girls realize the true meaning of equality. It's truly outstanding how simply the cartoon has explained true feminism. It's more amazing when the girls' school, Femme Fatale, is on Susan B. Anthony and her contribution to women's rights. Finally, after catching her red-handed, the girls put Femme Fatale in jail.
Well, it looks like the family that slays together stays.
Power Prof. It's the weekend, and Professor Utonium wants to spend the day at the beach, enjoying quality time with the girls. But an emergency call on the hotline makes the Powerpuff Girls leave immediately. When they return late at night, they find the professor has fallen asleep after eating the scrumptious dinner alone. To make up for the missed date, the girls entice the professor into taking them to Puppet Pals, the 3D movie. The professor pretends to be disinterested, but secretly enjoys the girls trying to get attention. However, the movie date is interrupted when a monster attacks the theatre, and the girls have to rush out for help. This makes the professor toil hard in the lab, as he comes up with something spectacular. While this is another one of the 22-minute segments, The good first half of the series features no dialogue except for the narration. As the girls find difficulty in defeating the monster, they get drained out, and when the mayor is almost swallowed by the monster, Professor Utonium saves him. The professor appears in a super suit and calls himself Powerpuff. He explains that this helps him spend some time with the girls and also contributes to crime fighting. Things start off really well as Super Family fights monsters and stops crime swiftly, but soon things start to change. First, the professor's forced use of not-so-cool slang makes the girl cringe, and then his babying of the girls, or teaching them, makes the girls impatient and embarrassed. He calls Buttercup in several dorky and adorable names, which tarnishes her rep as a badass. Even fleeing inmates laugh at Buttercup. Powerpuff also publicly reveals Bubbles' bedwetting tendencies that got cured, and once again, Bubbles flies away in shame. At last, the girls decide that they must get rid of Powerpuff. Apparently this episode was a fan service, since fans sent letters to McCracken about giving the professor superpowers. Opportunity for the girls comes soon, as Mojo Jojo has started destroying the city, and the Powerpuff family leaves to confront him. The professor makes the girls wear helmets and knee buckles to protect them, but Mojo laughs at them. He confines the Powerpuff Girls in cells and then challenges the professor. Powerpuff takes quite a beating from the mad monkey, but something in him helps the professor get back up and defeat Mojo Jojo. The professor lets out the girls, but declares he can no longer be a superhero, much to the glee of the Powerpuff Girls. Moral decay / meet the beat alls. After cleaning the house spotless, the Powerpuff Girls are gifted $1 each. Buttercup, who hates cleaning, gets overwhelmed and seems to love money as much as crooks, knocks out Bubbles' tooth in excitement. The professor assures Bubbles and asks her to keep it under her pillow, and the next morning she is amazed to find $1 in its place. Buttercup gets hooked as Bubbles, in her toothless voice, explains that the Tooth Fairy has given her $1. Buttercup tries different ways to knock out more of Bubbles' teeth and hits her, but the professor catches on and prohibits her from doing so. However, Buttercup's golden moment arrives when she knocks out a crook's tooth and gets $1 in exchange from the Tooth Fairy. Soon, she is knocking out every crook, villain, and monster's teeth, while her bag of coins starts getting heavy, which she hides from her sisters. But one day, the hotline doesn't ring all day, and Buttercup gets impatient. She goes out and knocks out Mojo Jojo's teeth, along with a few others. Mojo visits the dentist and finds the Gangrene Gang, Fuzzy Lumpkin and him, in a similar condition. He asks them if it's Buttercup and rants against her. He then calls the hotline as the mayor, but Blossom and Bubbles catch on. They trick Buttercup into being surrounded by the villains, who knock out her teeth while Blossom and Bubbles just watch. Maybe the payback was a little bit harsh, but the professor agrees and uses all the money Buttercup collected to pay the dental fees to fix her teeth. As we approach the second half of the show, let me tell you what's in store. There's going to be some romance and a wedding, but also the girls have to take their place in a superhero convention, as well as fight knockoffs, time travel, and also survive a musical. The next segment is an absolute homage to the Beatles, which is McCracken's favourite band. It begins with Townsville Big Four villains, Mojo Jojo, him, Fuzzy Lumpkins, and Princess Morbucks deciding it's the night they finish the Powerpuff Girls. The four individually arrive at the Powerpuff Girls' house just as they go to sleep, and an argument breaks out between them about who should beat the girls. As their sleep gets disturbed, the girls come out and ask them to stop, but the villains attack them together with a laser gun, acid ray, and electrocution. Fuzzy goes last as he seals the deal by just throwing a large rock at the girls. The villains are taken aback when they finally defeat the girls and decide to work together henceforward. They assume the name Beatles and start their criminal affairs. The girls arrive to stop them, and each of they are zapped and crushed by the deadly team of four. The narrator makes several Beatles references when he describes the crimes and actions of the Beatles. What's more, there are countless scenes and dialogues that are references to the Beatles' songs and concerts. In fact, an animated version of the band also appears twice in the segment. However, after taking several blows, the Powerpuff Girls have stopped showing up to stop crimes, and the Beatles' dominance grows. Ultimately, Professor Utonium encourages the girls and gives them an idea. The next day, while robbing a bank, Mojo Jojo encounters a female chimpanzee called Moko Yono, who has also come to loot the bank. Mojo Jojo falls in love and starts accompanying her. He starts dressing in all white, like Moko Yono, and starts following her ideas to annoy people. Now that's true evil, but it irritates the other three villains, and they leave Mojo Jojo. Moko Yono is actually a reference to John Lennon's wife, Yoko Ono. When the rest of the three villains start rampaging, the Powerpuff Girls finally answer the mayor's distress call. The attack of the three Beatles doesn't affect the girls and throws the trio in jail. Finally, it's time to confront Mojo Jojo. And with their zookeeper friend, the girls reveal that Moko Yono is actually a zoo chimp called Michelle. Michelle can't speak and leaves her white clothes behind. Mojo Jojo is devastated. And in the end, the girls take the heartbroken villain to join the rest of the Beatles in jail.
Fun and that's all. Hey, buddy, I'm sorry. Here, let me help you there.
Season 4, Get Back, Jojo. It's career day at Pokey Oaks Kindergarten, and Miss Keene asks the parents to share with the kids about their occupations. When it's Professor Utonium's turn, he brings in his newest invention, the time portal. As the professor explains the workings of the time portal, he reminisces about his childhood when he was disinterested in becoming a scientist. As luck would have it, Mojo Jojo is passing by the classroom right at that time, and he overhears the professor. Mojo captures Mary and disguises himself in her clothes. He keeps asking the professor questions about the time portal and how it works. Convinced that it will take Mojo Jojo right into the time, when the professor decided to pursue science, Mojo reveals himself and jumps into the portal. Professor Utonium calmly explains to everyone that Mojo Jojo is traveling in the fifth dimension, but his survival is up to chance. You gotta love this guy's optimism. I mean, the professor's. Also, hats off to the writers and animators for making the fifth dimension look like one-dimensional drawings. Professor Utonium also explains the concept of the fifth dimension using a mouse and a maze as the Powerpuff Girls prepare to dive into the fifth dimension. The professor warns the girls to be very cautious about hiding their superpowers and not to do anything that could alter the course of history. Speaking of history, the Powerpuff Girls is the last Hanna-Barbera Productions series for which Cartoon Network took over the production duties midway through the series. However, the HB logo still appeared. This is also the last episode to feature the traditional HB sound effects. Anyway, getting back to where we were. Oh, it's the 1950s, and Mojo Jojo lands in the school to look for the professor. He finds the teacher showing the children an educational video about not jumping into the volcano or doing anything near it. The volcano is very active, and it's the very same one that is now home to Mojo Jojo. The chimp is, however, in shock when he finds the square-faced kid Utonium, but he is a brat. Ms. Bellum and Ms. Keene are Utonium's classmates, and while Ms. Bellum finds the mayor stupid, Ms. Keene is the good girl who gets frightened of Utonium's antics. As the homeroom teacher guides the kids into making a model volcano, Utonium plays around with the chemicals, causing a blast. Mojo Jojo uses the chaos and kidnaps the boy. The Powerpuff Girls arrive amidst the smoke, and after asking the nervous kids, they learn what happened to the professor. Unable to use their powers, the Powerpuff Girls run across the town, while Mojo Jojo implores Utonium to reveal what made him choose science and make the Powerpuff Girls. Utonium remains clueless, continues to hit, kick, and punch, and refuses to answer Mojo Jojo, so the Mad Monkey forcibly drags him up the volcano. Mojo hits Utonium on the head and drops him into the molten lava, but the girls notice in time and save him. Utonium notices the girls before passing out, while the girls also beat Mojo Jojo, before Professor Utonium drags out all four of them into the present. The professor now remembers what made him choose science. It's because he wanted to create girls who saved his life.
I can't believe you got that one.
Him diddle riddle. The episode opens right in the middle of action, as the Powerpuff Girls are trying to solve a riddle. It has something to do with something yellow with 65 eyes, And although the girls defeat a monster filled with eyes, it's not the answer. The girls then notice a bus full of children that falls off a bridge. To give you more context, Him has taken the professor hostage and promises that he will have to pay if the girls are unable to solve Him's riddles. Him congratulates the girls and gives a second riddle to bring tears to the eyes of the people. Buttercup decides that hurting people is the best idea, while Bubbles tugs at their emotions. However, Blossom has a better idea as she takes the girls to the lake and creates a storm cloud, which floats back to City and Blossom makes it rain. For the next one, Him asks the girls to pick up the phone at the Chang and Ching crossroads without flying. Buttercup takes the subway, Bubbles rides a bus, and Blossom hitchhikes to reach their destination. Bubbles also spots a horse and follows her original idea to get a pony. They arrive right on time, but Him again gives them a math problem to solve about trains that will collide. After wasting some time on the abacus, Blossom gives up and remembers they are superheroes, so they can just stop the collision. After the crisis is averted, Him gives the girls another riddle to solve, which ends with them getting him an ice cream. This riddle meant nothing, and was only about getting the ice cream. As the girls keep solving the riddles, Him gets irritated. His next riddle is about two Ms. Keens, each hanged upside down above a vat of boiling water with sharks. Him explains that one of them always says the truth and one always lies, but the girls can only ask one question to find the real and righteous one. Blossom asks Ms. Keen who they should say is the real Ms. Keen. As both of the points to Ms. Keen too, Blossom decides she is the real one. However, Blossom's overconfidence becomes her downfall when Him makes the girls solve the SATs. Him makes a deal that the girls have to score 100 collectively. While Blossom answers diligently, Bubbles draws flowers, and Buttercup breaks into nervous sweats. She also tries to cheat. However, to their surprise, Bubbles scores the highest and Blossom the lowest. A constant ticking sound, accompanied by fast-paced background music, seems to give the episode the right edge. Also, it has Blossom as the MVP, as she appears to be the nerdiest and smartest of the three. For instance, when Him again asks them to defeat a giant monster without superpowers, it's Blossom who goes on top of a building's watchtower, jumps on the monster's head, pulls its hair to make it cry, and sends it packing to the airport. Of course, Bubbles and Buttercup also help, like Bubbles throws a banana peel to make it slip. Eventually, Him challenges the girls to find the professor, where it is boiling and freezing at the same time. The mayor comes to their assistance out of the blue and tells them of the coordinates. The coordinates given by the mayor, 32 degrees north and 212 degrees west, place Townsville in the Pacific Ocean, approximately 400 miles east-southeast of Honshu Island, Japan. Which serves well, as the Powerpuff Girls were quite popular in Japan, with even an anime adaptation called Powerpuff Girls Z. Anyway, the girls find a restaurant on the location called Right on Time, but it's the wrong one, and the correct one is just opposite the road called Otto Time. However, to their shock, the girls find it's a diner run by Him, who made a deal with the professor that he would have to pay full price for the flapjack if the girls can solve Him's riddle on time. Since the girls failed, the professor grumpily pays the bill but complains about the food. As the girls remain stunned, Him runs after the professor, asking him to return. Members only. The Powerpuff Girls rush home to see the live coverage of the Association of World Supermen AWSM Super Summit 2000, where their favourite superheroes meet. We are then introduced to a few, which include England's Big Ben, Africa's Mandingo, Australia's Down Under Mate, Jamaica's Ya Mon, Japan's Email, China's Mushu Gai Man, Mexico's Mucho Muchacho, and Asgard's Valhallan. At last, the founder of AWSM, Major Glory of America, arrives. As the girls discuss their favourite heroes and feel they are not good enough to join them, the professor encourages the girls to travel to Mount Everest and join them. This episode is actually a crossover with the Justice Friends Major Glory and Valhallan, who appear in Dexter's laboratory. The other heroes in the Rotunda are obvious spoofs of several DC and Marvel heroes. As the girls arrive at the Rotunda of Seclusion, Major Glory is taken aback and at first dismisses the girls. However, when the girls insist on joining, Major Glory puts them through tests. The first is the test of strength, where Buttercup competes against Big Ben in a lifting contest. However, when Big Ben lifts the mountain, he can hardly hold it, but Buttercup holds him instead, winning the bout. Next, it's Bubbles' turn in the test of speed against Email, where they have to race across Earth. Bubbles is confused at first and starts a few seconds late. While running, she asks Email if one of them has to win the race, and then runs past him when he confirms. After Bubbles wins, it's Blossom's turn to prove she can save the world with her wit. Major Glory accompanies her, but only as a supervisor, as she is asked to stop meteors from hitting Earth. Blossom tries to knock off the meteorites with brute strength, but there are too many, and so she freezes the big one and breaks it. The shards destroy all the smaller ones, while an awestruck Major Glory gets hit by one. The costumes of the Justice Friends are slightly changed, and they are not misogynistic in Dexter's laboratory. However, even after the girls score well and win, the heroes refuse to include them in the association. Major Glory even belittles them by asking them to learn household chores, such as cooking and cleaning, from their mum. This epic episode has broken every gender norm, as the girls also tell Major Glory about their dad doing all the household work. There's a reason they say, never meet your idols, and the heartbroken Powerpuff Girls return home. Professor Utonium tells them that he knows everything from the live coverage and embraces the girls. However, the news also shows that the heroes are now getting super thrashed by an alien bigot called Mascumax. Blossom realizes that the right thing to do is to save the superheroes, although it seems they deserve it. The girls return to the secret hideout of AWSM and beat the Transformer-like alien Mascumax. The alien also passes sexist remarks about cooking, and the girls decide it's time to cook him instead. They use a new maneuver, the furious flaming feline, and send Mascumax crying back to his mummy. Finally, the grateful superheroes ask the girls if they can join them instead. The day ends as the superheroes dress up like the Powerpuffs and join the girls.
Girls!
Knock it off! Professor Utonium informs the girls that his university roommate, Dick Hardley, is going to visit them soon. As the professor fondly remembers Dick, we find that Dick was resourceful and surely a dick, who took credit for things the professor did and used him. Anyway, when Dick arrives, he runs straight into the professor's lab to find what he can use, and is shocked to amaze after finding the Powerpuff Girls. Dick refers to the girls as things and immediately thinks of a business plan for using them as commodities to make money and market. The professor is finally disillusioned and kicks out Dick of his home. However, Dick is relentless, and the next day he picks up the girls from kindergarten. He tells them how many more Powerpuff Girls would benefit the world so much, and even asks how they were made. As he laments about not having Chemical X, the girls steal some for him and give it to Dick. Dick creates the Powerpuff Girls in an abandoned evil factory and soon markets them to the mayor of New York. However, there is something wrong with Dick's Powerpuff Girls, and we can't really put a finger on it. When the real girls and the professor come across the news about Powerpuff Girls saving New York from a giant alligator, the girls lie about visiting the city while having misgivings. FYI, the alligator is designed based on Wally Gator, another Hanna-Barbera creation. With his primary success, Dick delves into a business model as he ships Powerpuff Girls to several countries in exchange for substantial profits. There is a theory that Dick could be a brother to Dexter's dad from Dexter's laboratory, as both look similar and are voiced by Jeff Bennett. Dick opens a factory that makes cheap knockoffs of the girls, and with time, the girls become cruder and more improper. Complaints also pour in because the products don't last long or have deformities, but that's just part of the business plan to make more money. Meanwhile, the Powerpuff Girls come across an infomercial about the Powerpuff Girls with Chemical Extreme and how they are sold even to criminals. This makes them very angry, and they arrive at Dick's factory. As the girls demand to return the Chemical X, Dick refuses and swallows the entire bottle. It turns him into a monster, which defeats the girls and locks them in an extraction chamber. The professor has also learned what happened and arrived at the factory, but he might be too late as he finds Dick Monster extracting Chemical X from the girls, making them sick. As the professor pleads with Dick and sacrifices himself for the girls, Dick orders the crude Powerpuffs to take him away. However, the professor's love for the girls makes them realize that Dick never loved them. The Powerpuffs rebel and take down Dick Monster with them, while Professor escapes with the real girls. Dick and the crude Powerpuffs' deaths are again one of the rarest instances of characters dying. The professor's love and pain resurrect the girls, and he explains that Dick's creations were improper as they lacked the love he has for his children. Nano of the North. The episode begins with a long narration about happy Townsville. Honestly, it gets a bit tiring. But yeah, soon dark clouds appear and cover Townsville, and it starts raining. But mind you, it's only Townsville, as the suburbs and anywhere else remains perfectly fine. The rain is peculiar though, as it corrodes away buildings, vehicles and clothes. At the Powerpuff Girls' house, Professor Utonium comes across a corroding water droplet and rushes to the lab, while the girls also come across the news about the epidemic. The professor shows the girls that the water droplets contain nano-sized robots called nanobots, which are stealing carbon and multiplying. Professor Utonium even demonstrates how it's working and decides to shrink the Powerpuff Girls into nanobot size to let them get rid of the nanobots. He uses a micro-stabilizer to shrink them, but the girls become too small to fly faster, and the professor's normal tone becomes too loud for them. The professor starts whispering and takes the girls to the city in a jar. His car gets destroyed and the jar breaks, but the girls head on to fight the nanobots. The professor keeps a watch on them with a microscopic eye and directs the panicky townspeople the other way as he protects the Powerpuff Girls from being crushed. So far, so good. But it gets a little disappointing when the Powerpuff just beats, thrashes, kicks and punches the numerous nanobots. Let alone making sense, we deserved some scientifically gimmicky, smart way to battle the nanobots. But never mind, it looks like the girls are winning. However, the nanobots change their strategy and join together to become a 6-inch tall monobot. It subdues the girls and is about to crush them when the angry professor stomps on the monobot, destroying it for good. The cloud overhead vanishes, and the girls are bewildered. The city is saved. Well, what's left of it anyway. Keen on Keen / Not So Awesome Blossom. In the first segment, it's Valentine's Day, and the Powerpuff Girls have each made a card for Ms. Keen. All the students, especially the girls, are excited, but they find out that Ms. Keen doesn't have a date, as she says she doesn't have time for such things. Later at home, the girls watch a romantic movie when the professor calls them for dinner. They find out that even the professor doesn't have a sweetheart, as he doesn't have time for such things. So the girls do the most natural thing. They send a secret admirer letter to both adults, with words ripped right off the movie they watched. As Professor Utonium and Ms. Keen arrive at the restaurant, they get really awkward with each other. However, Ms. Keen spots the Powerpuff Girls spying on them and understands everything. They laugh it off, and the professor drops off Ms. Keen at home. The girls are disappointed that their plan didn't work, but fate has something else in mind. As Ms. Keen trips, the professor catches her, and they fall in love. However, this doesn't go well for the girls, as the professor forgets to prepare the girls for school and starts working out. He even gives the girls a teddy bear to gift Miss Keen. Miss Keen also turns up all decked out and calls recess just as the professor calls on the school's Powerpuff hotline. Miss Keen and Professor continue to hog up the hotline, speaking with each other. When Miss Bellum asks the mayor to call the girls to inform a crisis, the mayor listens to the lovebirds' conversation and is unable to interrupt them. Meanwhile, Townsville goes into ruins, and even Miss Bellum gets kidnapped. As for the kids in the kindergarten, it's chaos. Finally, the mayor has had enough and he stops the couple. The professor and Ms. Keen realize their mistake and how they were ignoring their duties. When the professor hears that Ms. Keen has a cat called Valentino, he gets uncomfortable and recollects how a cat once made him jump off a building. Ms. Keen refuses to believe the story and the couple breaks up, allowing the mayor to finally call the Powerpuff Girls into action. The story is often hated as fans think Professor and Ms. Keen make a good couple, and we agree. In the next segment, while fighting two of Mojo Jojo's robots, Blossom finds that her plan doesn't work. Buttercup steps up and defeats the robots while Blossom feels down. The camera installed in the robot observes Blossom. Back at home, Buttercup celebrates, while Blossom is still sad about her goof up. Blossom discovers she is jinxed, as it seems she is not able to do anything right. When she tries to serve the professor tea, the kettle handle breaks, burning the professor's legs with hot tea. A depressed Blossom writes a letter and leaves home, just as Mojo Jojo leaves a note for the professor. Mojo lies in his letter about kidnapping Blossom and asks the professor to visit his lair without Buttercup and Bubbles. Meanwhile, without Blossom's leadership, Buttercup assumes leadership, and her obnoxious attitude annoys Bubbles. They get a call from Professor in the hotline, but it's actually Mojo forcing the professor to speak. He calls the girls to Mojo's observatory. In the meantime, Blossom has been working in a hot dog restaurant and messing up orders when he gets the call from Mojo. As Blossom arrives at Mojo Jojo's observatory, Buttercup and Bubbles apologize to her and appreciate having her back, but show her that Mojo has the professor tied up above molten lava. Mojo Jojo explains the rest, as he has placed the girls on different platforms, each setting up a balance, preventing the professor from falling into the lava, and one step away may mean the professor will fall. As her sister asks her to think, Blossom finally has a bright idea. She leads the girls into rescuing the professor and bashes Mojo Jojo for good, sending him to jail once again. Season 5, Burglar Alarmed / Shotgun Wedding. On a crime-free night, Professor Utonium falls asleep in the lab while preparing for his dissertation, and not wanting to disturb him, the Powerpuff Girls tuck him in. However, there is still trouble lurking in the corner as a burglar enters the home. Bubbles wakes up and reaches for a glass of milk, when the burglar hands her the bottle without realizing it. Bubbles notices him, but nonchalantly returns to the bed. When Blossom asks her if everything is all right, Bubbles tells them about Mr. Burglar in her usual nonchalant way. Now, isn't she sweet? Blossom and Buttercup get wide awake as Buttercup refuses to believe her, but a loud noise assures Bubbles is right. The sweet girls decide to talk it out with the burglar so that he doesn't wake up the professor and approach him. The clueless burglar fails to recognize the girls and sends them to sleep, but a happy image of Bubbles frying up Mojo Jojo finally makes him realize that he has entered the wrong house to rob. Thus ensues a cat-and-mouse game of chase, as the three girls try to catch Mr. Burglar, who finally enters the professor's room. The burglar threatens to wake up the professor and asks the girls to stop, but the professor punches the burglar in his sleep and gets back to sleep. The burglar is thrown out of the house and decides to steal from Mojo Jojo's observatory without realizing who lives in it. For a change, Professor Utonium begins the episode with an introduction to the finest villains of the show. He describes the origin of each villain, but gets stumped when it comes to Fuzzy Lumpkin. Utonium compares Fuzzy to a missing link in human evolution or Bigfoot. Anyway, he takes a camera and leaves for the forest to conduct a study on Fuzzy Lumpkin. The professor hides behind a tree and sees Fuzzy taking a bath, wearing clothes and tripping over a pig. However, Fuzzy soon spots him and comes after him. The camera shows the professor running for his life, keeping notes and getting bruised. Fuzzy also scratches threatening notes in the trees to scare away the professor. The scared Professor Utonium runs across the forest, falls into mud and accidentally enters Fuzzy's cabin. As he wraps around a curtain and gets hay stuck to him, he looks like a lumpkin. Fuzzy falls in love with Professor Lumpkin and announces that he is getting hitched. Anyway, the happy news makes several lumpkins appear from their hiding, and the professor cries out for help. The Powerpuff Girls hear the shriek and rush into the forest to help. They beat the lumpkins as Professor and Fuzzy almost get married. As the Powerpuff Girls mistakenly hit the professor, the mud and stuff fall off him, and they recognize Professor Utonium. However, Fuzzy Lumpkin angrily approaches them, picks up the pile of mud, and takes it back to his cabin. As Fuzzy crazily makes out with the mud, the professor notes that Fuzzy Lumpkin is actually stupid. He eats up the note to never speak of the incident again, but the girls still tease him on the way back. The boys are back in town. After watching a series of videos about the Powerpuff Girls emerging victorious, defeating boys and villains, Him becomes furious. As he simmers with anger, he notices something on the videos that can help him defeat the girls. The following day, the Powerpuff Girls defeat a bunch of monsters with ease when the ground shakes and the rowdy rough boys emerge from the ground. The girls mock and tease the boys about their hairstyles and then head on to fighting them, which is rather evenly matched. However, the girls couldn't be bothered by these jokers for long, right? So they decide to lay on some sugar and start kissing the boys. But you should know the same trick doesn't always work twice. This time, the kisses turn the boys stronger, and they start growing into gigantic beings. As the girls get bewildered, the man behind the boys, him, appears and takes ownership of the monstrosity. After the overglorified drag leaves, the boys, Brick, Butch and Boomer start grossing out the girls as a battle tactic. By the way, the episode title is a pun on a song by Thin Lizzy. The rowdy rough boys mash the battered and bruised Powerpuff Girls together like a hockey puck. They break buildings and bars as well as cars to use them as skates and start playing hockey with the girls. As Boomer hits the girls into the goal, an indoor car park. It gives the girls some opportunity to hide and escape onto the rooftop of a nearby building. Buttercup is angry and wants to take on the boys, while her sisters try to stop her from shouting. The rowdy rough boys still find them and use them as toys in a ring match called Ultimate Fight. The constant hitting and bludgeoning have completely subdued the girls, and to humiliate them more, Butch places a slug on Bubbles' back and inside her clothes. Buttercup can't bear it anymore and punches Butch's tongue, making it sore. As Brick and Boomer laugh at him, Butch shrinks. Blossom notices and realizes that they need to humiliate the boys and hurt their masculinity to make them shrink. Buttercup starts babying Butch, while Bubbles puts makeup on Boomer, and Blossom pulls down Brick's pants, bullying them. With the addition of some baby talk, the girls are able to shrink the rowdy rough boys into toy size. Him appears, berates the boys, and returns with them, but not before alerting the girls, as the boys will be back again. PPGs/boy toys. When the Powerpuff Girls wake up to a wet bed, they start blaming each other and defending themselves. They try to think up different ways the bed could have gotten wet, but none of them seem plausible. They are even distracted while fighting a monster, and it takes up the whole day with a lot of mess. The issue repeats the next day and the next day and the next day. As the Powerpuff Girls argue over who did it, the professor strays away from the conversation and watches the news, which shows the PPGs are really neglecting their duty. The incident keeps the Powerpuff Girls distracted as they start doubting themselves as the bedwetter. Blossom stays back and discusses the issue with Ms. Keene, who assures her it will go away on its own, but gives her pamphlets to read. Buttercup brings up the issue with Professor Utonium as he gets awkward. The professor uses a lot of scientific jargon to explain bedwetting and its effect on children's psyches without doing anything about it. Finally, Bubbles asks the mayor, out of all people, who advises her to wear diapers. Surely Bubbles didn't deserve to see the mayor in diapers, and she is traumatized, but so are her sisters. As they watch water flowing or hear about the word accident, the girls start feeling embarrassed and guilty. At night, the Powerpuff Girls stay wide awake in their dark room, thinking of the events. However, they catch the miscreant. It's Mojo Jojo pouring H2O on the bed. The Powerpuff Girls are super angry as Blossom deduces that Mojo Jojo did this to keep them away from saving the city. However, Mojo claims it was a prank as he just hates the girls. However, as Mojo Jojo starts laughing, he pees a little, making the Powerpuff Girls burst out in laughter. In the second part, Princess Morbucks's limousine gets destroyed when the Rowdy Rough Boys crash into it after a fight with the Powerpuff Girls. Seeing that the Rowdy Rough Boys are just spawns of evil but have superpower, Princess Morbucks feels she could join them. She gears up and helps the boys by thrashing the girl. The Rowdy Rough Boys enjoy the show, but laugh when she asks them to take her into the gang. The boys even call Princess Morbucks let's see, a lame, sissy baby girl before kicking her off. A beaten up Morbucks starts crying as the Powerpuff Girls stop themselves from thrashing. The Powerpuff Girls get angry when they hear the boys have insulted Morbucks because she is a girl. However, this gives Princess Morbucks an idea, and she intentionally exaggerates her encounter with the boy. Princess Morbucks tries to achieve her long-lost dream of becoming a Powerpuff Girl as she takes the girls to her hidden inventory of weapons. Blossom gets awestruck by the combat weapons and vehicles. Princess Morbucks tries to forge a deal where she will let the Powerpuff Girls use the armory, but she will also be a Powerpuff Girl. Despite Buttercup and Bubbles' feelings otherwise, Blossom suddenly agrees, but only after they defeat the boys. Later, when the Rowdy Rough Boys are wreaking havoc on a fish market, the Powerpuff Girls appear in different vehicles, all sponsored by Princess Morbucks. Blossom pilots a large boat, Buttercup pilots a tank, and Bubbles pilots a plane, as they attack the boys. However, none of their attacks land right and just miss the boys by an edge. The boys get excited and throw off the Powerpuff Girls from their respective vehicles and take command of them. Meanwhile, Princess Morbucks gets furious at the Powerpuff Girls for missing the boys and getting thrown out by them. However, the girls have a plan, and Blossom asks Morbucks to wait and watch. The idiotic, rowdy, rough boys start shooting at each other and pile up in the middle of the road with their wreckage of vehicles. Although the boys seemed to be physically hurt, they still seemed happy and excited. On the other hand, Princess Morbucks rants about the Powerpuff Girls for not being all that they seem to be, just as the girls quietly get away. Silent treatment / sweet and sour. The professor, like most dads, is keen on the Powerpuff Girls' education, and so instead of taking them to a good megaplex, he takes the girls to watch a silent movie so that they learn the origin of cinema. The Powerpuff Girls are not at all happy with the arrangement and begrudgingly sit to watch the movie called For Once He Is Speechless. The movie features Max von Nitrate in a leading role. He kidnaps a woman and enters a room with the captive. But as the Powerpuff Girls make fun of him, Nitrate magically seems to get upset. The name of the villain is a tribute to Nitrate films produced in the early 20th century. He reveals that the woman he has kidnapped is actually Professor Utonium, and that now he wants the professor's voice. The girls get mad and enter the silent film through the projection lights, but soon discover that their powers don't work while inside the film. Nonetheless, the girls chase after Nitrate as he packs Utonium into a car and drives away. The Powerpuff Girls call the police and hitchhike on the police wagon to get Professor Utonium. Meanwhile, Nitrate arrives at a field and gets on an airplane with the tied-up professor. The girls arrive just in time to hang onto the plane before it takes off. Several policemen also hung onto the girls, forming a long chain. When the plane flies over Africa, a gorilla jumps onto the airplane. He throws away the policeman and the Powerpuff Girls while climbing up to the pilot's seat and throws out Nitrate from the seat. As Nitrate and the others keep falling, the gorilla kisses Professor Utonium and flies away with him. An upset Bubbles claims she doesn't like the movie and tries to change the film, but they are thrown out of the picture into real life. Nitrate also flies away through the projection light and ends up as the soul of the projectionist. The projectionist reveals he is the real Max von Nitrate and a yesteryear actor whose career tanked due to the advent of talking and coloured film. He apologizes and claims that he only wanted the professor's voice and not to harm anybody. The Powerpuff Girls empathize with Nitrate, and of course, since he has an odd voice, they promise to help him, and later a new movie releases in colour where Utonium voices Nitrate. The professor is also acting in the movie, but he is the butler and has Nitrate's voice. The second segment starts off with the Powerpuff Girls defeating the usual suspects, but Blossom is bored that it's always the same. However, when they are called to the bank, the Powerpuff Girls are shocked to find the villains are three cute, fuzzy, talking animal babies. A puppy, a kitten, and a bunny, to be precise. The people are charmed by the adorableness of the talking animals and let them steal anything. Buttercup tries to stop, but the people get angry at her, and it becomes news. The next time the animals steal, the girls just couldn't let them go and sent the animals to jail. However, the animals are released for being too cute, while the PPG becomes the villains, as activists even protest outside the house. The subtle satire in the show makes it still relevant, although this particular story did not get much appreciation. Moving on, the talking animals continue their crime spree by winning over people with kindness, and even the mayor finds them adorable. Eventually, the Powerpuff Girls come up with an idea as they realize that everyone wants to cuddle with them. The girls trick the animals into visiting Pokey Oaks Kindergarten by disguising it as a bank. As the cute criminals enter the building, they are attacked by the onslaught of hugs and kisses of the kindergarten kids, which is punishment enough for the...
Do with it. Girls! I-beams!
Season 6. Primates / coup d'etat. When Jojo is sleeping at night, a mysterious figure in the shadows wakes him up, and all Mojo can see is his intimidating eyes. Mojo Jojo gets kidnapped, and the kidnapper recalls the tragic backstory of his own accident. It follows an incident when Mojo Jojo wanted to turn a group of primates into super intelligent monkeys so that they could aid Mojo in his mission to defeat the Powerpuff Girls and ensure world domination. However, thanks to Rocco Socko, an angry ape, breaking out of the glass, the experiment turned pretty chaotic. Rocco not only shattered multiple glasses containing other primates, but one such poor monkey got its brain sucked out. Although the monkey survived, Mojo Jojo rejected him and is now known as Mopey Popo. The brainless monkey emerges from the shadows to get his revenge. Several flashback scenes in this segment are from the Powerpuff Girls movie. He threatens Mojo Jojo with a banana jerky, but Mojo manipulates Mopey into thinking that he is Mojo's favorite, and Mojo Jojo will take his help in his plan to destroy the Powerpuff Girls. However, Mopey Popo turns out to be more of a nuisance. He keeps disrupting Mojo Jojo as he tries to place a radioactive isotope in a machine. At last, Mojo Jojo tries to use the last isotope in the Super Friezo Ray machine, but again, as he gets mad at Mopey and turns to talk to him, Mojo's cape falls over the console and the isotope falls over the machine, slicing it in two. Mopey convinces Mojo that these accidents won't occur if he could help, but again fails to respond when Mojo Jojo needs his help. At last, Mojo kicks Mopey Popo out of his lair, but when Mopey returns with the Powerpuff Girls tied up, Mojo Jojo starts freezing the Powerpuff Girls with his machine, but Mopey gets bored and shuts it down, allowing the girls to recover and destroy the machine. Mopey leaves, and Mojo tries to stop him. As Mopey ignores him, Mojo returns only to face the Powerpuff Girls' wrath. Let me remind you, this is the last season. And although Cartoon Network thought a 7th season could do well, both McCracken and Savino thought 6 was enough. In the second segment, Professor Utonium goes to an automobile repair shop to get a new windshield, but he gets enchanted by all the different new accessories and shops for everything. Sometime late, the professor unveils his newest creation, the Connectly Automatic Robotic Roadstar, in short, car, to his daughters. The girls don't seem ecstatic, and so Professor Utonium explains to them about its features, which include making coffee, turning into a robot, and having its own voice. The Powerpuff Girls seek a ride, but Car stops them as it doesn't have enough seatbelts. As the professor leaves with the car, an entire montage plays out with Professor and Car spending romantic moments. When the professor returns very late at night, he has a completely different avatar with long hair and a racer outfit. He refuses to read bedtime stories to the girls and goes to sleep. However, the girls get suspicious about the car and go to investigate when Car shows its evil side and threatens them. Professor Utonium wakes up and misjudges the girls. He sternly sends the girls to sleep. The plot of this episode is similar to Stephen King's novel Christine. The next night, the Powerpuff Girls creep in on the car and try to stop it by pouring Engine Stop 2000, but Car tells them that he is immune to it. As Car tries to run down the girls, the professor witnesses it. The girls grovel with the professor about not spending time with them, and that he looks like he is from a bad 80s TV show. Professor Utonium finally comes to his senses and hugs it out with the girls, taking them in. However, Car kidnaps the professor that night, and the next day, the girls notice their father has vanished. As the Powerpuff Girls confront Car, he reveals the professor all tied up and sitting inside the car. Car turns into robot mode to fight the Powerpuff Girls, while Professor Utonium tries his own bit in trying to eject from the seat. As the girls notice this, they give a push to the robot, enabling the professor to succeed. As the Powerpuff Girls proceed to attack the car, it breaks down, revealing that it was just jealous and wanted the professor all for itself. The heartfelt confession makes the professor and the girls tear up. Finally, Professor Utonium comes up with the idea of a robot called Prof, person replacing original father, to send away with Car. However, as Blossom points out, he may be out of a car right now.
Pure evil, which makes me the more fit father, since I am...
Custody Battle / City of Nutsville. Okay, so the first segment is one of the unique episodes that doesn't feature the Powerpuff Girls. It begins with Mojo Jojo sitting in the park on Father's Day and cursing all the father-son duos when he spots his own sons, the Rowdy Rough Boys. He is astonished to find how they are alive after getting blown up, and him appears to take credit for that. Him explains that he made the Rowdy Rough Boys stronger, edgier, and the Powerpuff Girls cooties. However, what ensues is a custody battle of sorts as both Mojo Jojo and him claim the boys as their sons. Mojo Jojo and him then resort to a battle of evil to show how evil they are. It begins with Mojo Jojo using a remote-controlled pickle to draw him out. As the mayor follows the pickle, his clothes get stuck and he gets stripped naked, but completely unaware. Him encroaches upon it as he uses a pickle-shaped blimp to make the mayor publicly climb a building and catch the pickle. As him humiliates the mayor, the Rowdy Rough Boys seem satisfied, but Mojo Jojo appears with a giant robot and sucks the boys inside before defusing the pickle blimp. Him also shows the boys how he can influence scientists in activating a reactor and sending Earth near the sun. Mojo Jojo points out that this is more stupid than evil as the argument continues. Fed up with both, Brick announces that they don't care who is more evil or stupid, as all they care about is taking down the Powerpuff Girls, which is truly evil. As the boys leave, him and Mojo Jojo break down in joy and feel proud of their kids as they embrace. In the second segment, the mayor fills up a hole in the park by covering it with his own fountain statue, while Professor Utonium and his girls enjoy a picnic. When a bee lands on Bubbles' sandwich, she mistakenly consumes it and gets a swollen throat. Bubbles is made to wear a collar brace and prohibited from speaking for a week. It also doesn't help when Blossom and Buttercup make fun of Bubbles, making her angry. That night, squirrels surround the statue and start digging. They also climb the statue and start gnawing it. The next morning, the mayor wakes up to find squirrels sitting on his head. But it's not just him, as squirrels have run down Townsville, biting people's heads and the buildings. The mayor calls the Powerpuff Girls hotline, but unfortunately, she can't speak and writes on the board to tell her sisters about the crisis. As the girls rush in to help, they find the city filled with angry squirrels. They also find the mayor hiding in his bathroom. Blossom decides to use Bubbles' ability to talk to squirrels and then realizes she won't be able to speak. As Buttercup complains about the situation, Bubbles heads out and finds Bullet, a squirrel that Bubbles once saved and revived with Chemical X, which gave her powers like the Powerpuff Girls. Bullet finds out what the squirrels are angry about, and Bubbles tries to explain it to the mayor and her sisters by drawing on the board. When Blossom and Buttercup come to the conclusion that the mayor is sitting on bombs, but it's the wrong answer, and exasperated Bubbles and Bullet leave. They rip off the mayor's statue, breaking it in the process. Turns out the statue was sitting on a bunch of nuts. Later, the mayor unveils a statue of Bubbles and Bullet in the park, while the now recovered Bubbles translates everything to squirrel. Blossom and Buttercup also help in cleaning up the mess.
Fuzzy Lumpkins, what are you doing here?
I'll have you girls know that this here is my...
Roughing it up / what's the big idea? After defeating villains day and night, the Powerpuff Girls are tired, and so Professor Utonium brings them to the Townsville Bayou to enjoy a time of peace and vacation. However, it gets disrupted when Fuzzy Lumpkins arrives with his nephews, Wuzzy, Cuzzy, and Scuzzy. Fuzzy demands that the land is his property, while Blossom and the girls argue that it's public property. They also argue about keeping a possum as a pet rather than eating it. Professor Utonium tries to keep the peace between the warring groups and takes the girls inside the van. At night, the Powerpuff Girls and Professor's sleep is disrupted by Fuzzy's nephews playing with cans. And in the morning, a fishing experience goes wrong when Fuzzy and his nephews dive into the river and kill the nearby fish. As they come out and fling away the mud, it covers the girls. Each time the professor tries to keep the peace, but the girls face more gross horror thanks to the Lumpkins. A scene also parodies Bob Ross painting when a bush appears above the professor's head like Bob's hair. However, all hell breaks loose when Fuzzy Lumpkins cuts off a tree that Utonium had planted as a young boy. As Professor and Fuzzy get into a fight, the Powerpuff Girls and Fuzzy's nephews leave. After looking for them for a long time, Fuzzy and Professor spot the kids enjoying their time together. Although the Professor and Fuzzy find it precious, they again get into a fight. Speaking of precious, in 2002, TV Guide ranked Powerpuff Girls as number 13 on the 50 greatest cartoon characters list. The next segment begins with Mojo Jojo building a scale model of Townsville and deciding which place to rob first. As he plays around with his own figurine, Mojo Jojo gets entwined in model electric poles and accidentally breaks off the building, damaging the entire setup. However, this gives him an idea about defeating the Powerpuff Girls. So on a random day, Mojo Jojo approaches the girls and uses his newest invention to inflate the girls into 50-foot tall and 30-ton giants. As the girls try to crush Mojo Jojo or capture him, they start causing damage, and a group of protesters appears from nowhere. When Bubbles cries, a single tear almost drowns the people, while one of her eyelashes crushes a car. Realizing they need the professor's help to get back to their normal size, they return home. The professor tells the girls that he needs the device Mojo Jojo used on the Powerpuff Girls, and plans on reverse engineering them. Blossom gives it to the professor, although she may have stepped on it. Meanwhile, the girls return to find Mojo Jojo, who is currently on a crime spree now that the Powerpuff Girls are out of range. However, the girls continue to accidentally damage Townsville as they look for Mojo Jojo, who slyly gets away every time. This doesn't last long as Professor Utonium finishes modifying the machine and returns to the city. He shrinks the Powerpuff Girls to their normal size as they capture Mojo Jojo. As Mojo is thrown back to jail, he wonders how the professor reversed the action of his device, as it is not programmed to do so. It's revealed that he actually enlarged Townsville. Nothing Special / Neighborhood. A raging giant Spanish squirrel on fire starts rampaging in Townsville, and the Powerpuff Girls come to the rescue. However, with Bubbles' special talent of multilingualism and understanding squirrel tongue, they learn that the giant squirrel is rampaging because it's on fire. Blossom immediately douses the flame with her ice breath abilities, and the squirrel stops rampaging. The squirrel thanks Bubbles and Blossoms for their special talent, but seeing Buttercup's sad face, the squirrel also thanks Buttercup for being there. However, the townspeople start cheering for Bubbles and Blossom, making Buttercup more upset. When Bubbles decides to head back home for the professor's tacos, Buttercup demands to find out her special ability. In the Latin version, the giant squirrel speaks English, and instead of tacos, Bubbles talks about hamburgers. As Bubbles and Blossom try to help Buttercup, it turns into a full-blown face-off and lots of destruction in Townsville, but weirdly enough, it doesn't seem to bother the townspeople. Eventually, Buttercup gets tired out when she finds that all the super abilities she has are common with her sisters. In frustration, Buttercup sticks out her tongue and curls it. However, the others are amazed, and no matter how hard they try, none of the citizens or the other Powerpuff Girls are able to curl their tongue, making Buttercup happy. In the next part, children of Pokey Oaks Kindergarten rush back home to watch their favorite television program, The Wondrous World of Whimsical Willy. Bubbles also sits down in front of the telly to watch the show. In the show, Mr. Willy takes out a happy mask and a sad mask from his magic satchel, and then he goes to Daydream Lane to find where Happy comes from. There, he meets Maid Mary, Kitty the Elephant, and other characters. A character called Dynamite Dog brings terrible news of a sadness cloud covering Daydream Lane and making Crazy Horse unhappy. Mr. Willy then speaks to the children directly and points out a $100 bill, calling it Happy Paper. He asks the children to donate Happy Paper to save Daydream Lane. All the children rush out, including Bubbles, while the mayor also finishes watching the show and collects his piggy bank for the donation. But when he returns to the vault, the mayor finds that all of Townsville's money is gone, and there's a gaping hole in the wall. On that note, McCracken wanted Joker from Batman, the animated series, 1992, to appear, and the mayor would be a fanboy enough to stop the Powerpuff Girls from taking him down. However, the plan was rejected by Warner Brothers. The mayor calls the Powerpuff Girls, and Blossom and Buttercup answer, whereas Bubbles is nowhere to be found. The girls finally spot Bubbles in the Whimsical Willy TV program, donating all of Townsville's money to Mr. Willy. Blossom and Buttercup break into the studio to make Bubbles understand that it's all fake and a set. They also expose the characters as prison escapees, whereas Mr. Willy is a crook himself. An angry Bubbles takes down all the fugitives single-handedly and then also stops Mr. Willy from escaping. Bubbles returns to the mayor and apologizes to him, commenting that they shouldn't always believe what they watch on TV, but the mayor says otherwise.
Without any luck, luck, and a short time later regrouped at the mayor's office to discuss the situation.
I see a funny cartoon in your future /Octagon. This is the official series finale, and the first part tells the story of a crook called Madame Argentina and her sidekick, Fred the Goose. Madame Argentina pretends to be a medium for fortune telling, while Fred pickpockets the customer. Together, they have robbed the famous rich people and businessmen, and now their latest victim is the mayor of Townsville. However, the crooks steal more than money from the mayor as they steal the key to Townsville and lock him out of the city. The mayor informs the Powerpuff Girls 3 days after the incident, and the girls disguise themselves as a wealthy man to catch Madame Argentina red-handed. However, they get found out by Fred, and the crooks flee to a remote island, where Madame Argentina buys 3 Powerpuff voodoo dolls and pins. Madame Argentina uses the dolls to keep the girls hanging in midair. The story then moves on to a random commercial for Pickle Patch, featuring Mayor and Ms. Sarah Bellum. After the advertisement, a fan steals the voodoo dolls, and the Powerpuff Girls are finally free. They obtain a voodoo doll of Fred and try to grill him. Coincidentally, Madame Argentina flies over the Powerpuff home and notices this. As the crooks crash land, they fall directly into the grill, and the girls close the lid. The Powerpuff Girls return all the stolen goods to the victims, including the mayor's, and the grilled villains are sent to prison. In the final segment, it's party time at Professor Utonium's house, and despite Buttercup despising their attire, they are dressed in tutus. The prettiest girl, Bubbles, is all excited, but her heart sinks when she finds a dismembered tentacle of her favorite toy, Octi. She falls asleep while wailing, and when she wakes up, Bubbles starts wondering who would have mutilated her toy. Her first guess is Buttercup, who hated the toy and promised to destroy it. Well, you can't blame her, as Buttercup and Blossom were being thrashed by a giant octopus, while Bubbles was cuddling with Octi. Bubbles also doubts Blossom, as she threatened Bubbles about the toy going missing and Bubbles having to sleep without it. Bubbles also remembers how Ms. Keen once took away Octi as Bubbles was playing with the toy and not paying attention in class. The last guess is the mayor, as he too wanted Octi. A furious Bubbles confronts everyone about her lost toy and demands that the one who stole it return it under the light. It doesn't work, but the phone rings, and a mysterious person claims that he has Octi. The voice tells us it's none other than Mojo Jojo, and he demands a large supply of Chemical X. This is a homage to Roger L. Jackson, who not only voiced Mojo, but also Ghostface, the scary caller in the Scream franchise. Unfortunately for Mojo, Professor Utonium claims he accidentally destroyed the toy by vacuuming it. However, when he tried to fix it, he found one leg missing. Bubbles gives him the leg, and after it's successfully fixed, it's time to find the blackmailer making a false claim. Professor Utonium calls the operator and learns the call is made from inside the house. As Bubbles keeps the caller busy, others go looking for the call. Mojo Jojo is sitting on the toilet, devouring a banana cream pie that was earlier delivered by an extremely unhygienic guy. The guy calls to inform that the pie is contaminated, as everyone finds Mojo just as he starts feeling sick. Marvelous verdict. The Powerpuff Girls is a true gem of the 90s. It boasts of clean and fresh artwork, a truly hilarious villain ensemble, and non-cliched plots that click. The intro and the ending credit music are peppy and hummable. Maybe it's the Chemical X that made the show legendary, but we would really love to know what you love or hate about the series. Also, if you appreciate our content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more.